Hello there, and welcome to the very first episode of Battle of the Pilots. I am Graham Raddings, and I'm joined by my good friend and ardent TV watcher, Adrian Mills.
Ardent.
Yes. Ardent. In this podcast, we reach into the massive back catalogue of TV shows from over the last 50 years and pluck out a couple of pilot episodes for a head-to-head battle. To ensure we can crown a champion, we will take a wry, comedic and suspicious look at both chosen episodes, discussing their relative merits or demerits, and scoring them out of 10 for their story, characters, set, music, visual effects, and influence to eventually settle on an overall score. In the end, one pilot show will emerge as the winner, while the other one will go home to tell its older brother we've been picking on him. For this inaugural episode, we have chosen for this inaugural episode, we have chosen two blockbuster TV sci-fi shows from the late 70s, early 80s. That's right. Tonight, we bring you Battlestar Galactica versus Buck Rogers in the 25th century. Let battle commence.
Indeed. It's a heavyweight opener, isn't it?
It is.
In the late 70s sci-fi TV drama genre.
I know, these ones ruled the roost.
They did indeed rule the roost. You know, more so than what else was there? Logan's Run, things like that.
Yeah, there was a lot of shows around that time, the late 70s, early 80s, peak time. Remember that Star Wars had happened, and so therefore sci-fi was cool and interesting, and everyone decided to make a sci-fi show.
That is true. I mean, I don't think I would get either of these shows if we hadn't had Star Wars in 1977.
No, absolutely not.
There's a lot of claim on the back of that, not just on TV, but also cinema as well. So you things like Battle of the Planets and everything that came from that. There was tons of this kind of space opera, space fantasy type fare, and I think these were the two biggest TV offerings that tried to do something similar.
Yeah, well, let's not forget, of course, that the special effects were completed by the guy that did the special effects for Star Wars on both counts.
That is true.
So there's no wonder why there's a similarity
and also
the way they might play out.
And also, at times, actually use the same machines, the same things that were used on Star Wars to make them, much to George Lucas's anger and annoyance.
Yes, and also, of course, there's some borrowings of some of the. I think Roger Corman's had an influence in some of the spaceships in here, because I'm pretty sure that certainly in Battlestar Galactica, the ragtag fugitive fleet looked like a lot of models they found in the background warehouse for something like Battle Beyond the Stars. But we can look and discuss, we'll come to all of those marvelous things. For now, let's just pause for a moment and think about what the background is for both of these shows. Adrian, tell us in your own words, what is the background of these two shows?
Okay, well, the background in my own words, as per Wikipedia,
I'll do.
It's Battlestar Galactica is an American science fiction television series created by Glenn A. Larson. We can just substitute Buck Rogers into that bit if you want. That began the Battlestar Galactica franchise. It starred Lorne Greene, Richard Hatch, Dirk Benedict, and it follows the surviving humans as they flee in Battlestar Galactica and other ships in search for a new home while being pursued by the Cylons. So that's Battlestar Galactica. We'll talk about spin-offs and sequels and things later on, but it did spawn a few of them, so we'll come to them. Buck Rogers, on the other hand, in the 25th century, is an American science fiction adventure television series produced by Universal Studios. Ran for 2 seasons from September 1979, and the feature-length pilot episode, which is what we are looking at, was released as a theatrical film before the series aired. Again, it was developed by Glenn A. Larson and Leslie Stevens. And it's actually based on the character Buck Rogers, who was created in 1928 by Philip Francis Nolan. Has been previously featured in comic strips, novellas, a serial film, and on television and radio. So of the two, Buck Rogers goes back farther. It's a kind of a Flash Gordon style thing, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Similar style thing, whereas Battlestar Galactica is I believe it's a all new, all singing, all dancing new entry into the sci-fi oeuvre.
Well, certainly all dancing, but of course we'll come to that.
That's more the Buck Rogers.
True. So yes, both TV shows have spawned, certainly Buck Rogers seems to have a lot of fan fiction and a lot of fan support. Fans have always been quite vociferous about these particular shows. So I suppose we should have to tread carefully as we take them into battle. But into battle we must take them. And because otherwise, how are we going to decide which one is the winner of the battle? There's no other way. We've got to go into this. Now, the format for these is we've set aside some, what we'll call characteristics, but I suppose what they are is kind of themes. So we're going to look at these things sort of separately. So And we're going to look firstly at the story and the narrative of each pilot. In this instance, of course, the pilots are kind of special because they were kind of released as movies over here, I think. So either way, whether it's a pilot episode that's compiled from other pilot episodes or whether it's 2 episodes crushed into a pilot, these are the way that we encountered these particular sci-fi shows, certainly in the UK, before they became on TV, because they were on TV in the UK a lot later than they were in the US. Anyway, we're going to deal with that. So we're going to look at the story, the performance, characters, the sets, the costumes, the music, sound effects, the visual effects, the reception influence, and decide on an overall score. Of course, once the overall score is decided, well, we'll have a winner, won't we? And we'll know. So, without further ado, let's dive into the story.
So the story behind Buck Rogers, the précis of this, the back of the book, shall we say, is a 20th century astronaut emerges out of 500 years of suspended animation into a future time where Earth is threatened by alien invaders. And that's from the IM Internet Movie Database. Alternatively, one might read this entire thing as the final moments of a dying mind frozen in space, a la Total Recall, and everything that happens is just a dream.
Bleak. It's so bleak.
Well, that's, there's an argument for that, especially with the opening credits, but we'll come to those later, I suppose, at some point. Yes. Anyway, if we take this as is, that this really happened, the story's laid out, there's a pre-credit sequence before we get to the aforementioned title sequence, and it has the following narration. So in the year, I can't do it, is it Mel Blanc who reads this out? It's a very portentous voice. In the year 1987, at the John F. Kennedy Space Center, NASA launched the last of America's deep space probes. The payload perched on the nose cone of the massive rocket was a one-man exploration vessel, Ranger 3, and aboard this compact starship, a lone astronaut, Captain William Buck Rogers, was to experience cosmic forces beyond all comprehension. Now, there's more to this opening, but was that the plan? Was that what they sent him into space for? Because it never says.
Never really says why he was there, does it?
No.
Can you go on this probe?
To probe what? Where's he going? You see a shot of him flying past the moon, but where's he off? Which isn't,
by the way, deep space, just saying.
Well, it's going to take him a while to get to deep space. We've discussed deep space on our sister podcast, Up to the Past.
We have.
It's massive. It takes a long time to get anywhere.
Yeah, longer than 500 years, ironically.
Yeah, ironically, yeah. So what was the plan? What was NASA's plan for this?
Well, I have to say, I don't think they liked him. So they just jetted him off into space. What's the mission again? Deep space probing. You get out there and probe that deep space. Do we need to send any information back? No, don't worry about that so much.
Just make some notes.
Just make some notes. We'll put plenty of note paper in there. Just get probing. So, it's all about the probing.
You probably need that when you run out of toilet paper.
Is there a specific area I should be deep probing? Just go for the whole lot.
All of it, all of space. Just come back in later.
See that space between the moon and Venus there, yeah, or the moon. Well, anywhere really, just over there.
Off you go.
Not Earth.
Not Earth, no. Anyway, whilst he's out there, he experiences cosmic. Something happens. There's the perfect storm of perfect elements. The chances are microscopic, astronomical. And what they do is they freeze him and coat him in a nice coating of grey. I don't know what it is.
They crustify him
real good, and he just leans back, all content.
Yes, he just falls asleep and leans back and freezes.
Absolutely. Anyway, 500 years later, he's finally picked up by the Draconian flagship, which is commanded by the Princess Ardala and Kane, her second in command. After a bit of chat, they send him on his way to Earth, but they put a tracking device on his ship. By the way, there are spoilers in this. We can't discuss these without spoilers, so get used to it, okay? Yeah. If you're going, I've never watched Buck Rogers. Then tough.
Too late.
Go watch it and then come back.
Go and watch it then.
And then, so they put a tracking device on his ship so they can learn the way through Earth's defenses. Upon arriving, Buck is arrested by Colonel Wilma Daring, and she is told that pirates are starving the Earth out by taking out the supplies en route, and they think he's a pirate spy. And more important, though, is Buck's desire to see what happened to the Earth in the cataclysmic wars in the intervening 500 years, which has rendered the Earth outside of the main city uninhabitable. That is, unless you happen to own a face scarf. Then you're all right. Luckily, a quick search of the ruins turns up the grave of Buck's parents, thus confirming what he has not really believed up to this point, despite the entirety of the Earth looking, quite done in. Upon returning to the space city, Buck is sentenced to death. Should have stayed out there.
Yeah, I was going to say, it would have been better off, really.
Yeah, but Colonel Daring and Buck hatch a plan to go and investigate the Draconian spaceship and see if Buck is telling the truth. Of course he is, And after some dancing and loving, he manages to take down the Draconian forces and show that he is not a spy and is a willing servant of the Earth forces. Wilmer professes that she'll be all woman from him from now on. But he doesn't seem to care at all. The Draconian forces retreat, but swear to be back in future episodes. There you go.
Okay, that's Buck Rogers.
That's the Buck Rogers story. You got anything to add to that nonsense?
It's all, I suppose, classic. It's kind of, you can sort of tell that it was written in the 20s, that kind of daring do. It's very Flash Gordon-y, isn't it?
Yes.
One guy suddenly transformed, fish out of water style. The irony of it is he's not really a fish out of water because he's still on Earth. And what always makes me laugh is they just kind of take the fact that he was a NASA pilot, just like, you were a NASA pilot. Yeah, I was a NASA pilot. NASA was on Earth. So where else could he been from? He wasn't going to be a Draconian pilot, conveniently disguised as a 500-year-old NASA pilot, is he? It's like,
no.
What kind of crazy plan would that be?
Yeah.
And they also scan his ship. When they find his ship, the Draconians, they scan it and go, oh, it's an old Earth ship. It's like, why would you know that?
Yeah, and why would they have found it?
Anyway.
I don't know.
We can't question those details too often in this.
Not really, no. So do you want to tell us the Battlestar story?
Yes, of course. So in Battlestar Galactica, the human population of the 12 colonies, that is, Erelon, Aquaria, Cancerion, Caprica, Geminon, Leonis, Libran, Picon, Sagittarion, I'm guessing there's a lot of Rons here, Scorpia, Tauron, and Virgon. Okay.
Big Ron, Ron Jeremy.
Big Ron, little Ron, cardboard box Ron, are at the brink of a unilateral peace with their long-standing and mortal enemies, the Cylons. Bum, bum, bum. At the culmination of the peace treaty, when all of humanity are celebrating and the Council of the 12, that's the leaders of the 12 colonies, having a meeting with some tea and biscuits, the Cylons, with the assistance of a sneaky human double agent named Baltar, stage a spectacularly obvious double cross and stage an all-out nuclear war on all 12 colonies at once in a bid to wipe out the human race forever, the rotters. Even the mighty Battlestars, the flagship intergalactic battle cruisers of the colonial fleet, assigned to protect the colonies, are all cut with their space pants down, with the exception of one, the Battlestar Galactica. So following the devastating attack, what remains of the scattered and broken population of the colonies are given the mandate by Adama, commander of the Galactica, presumably on Galactica FM, because I've no idea how he gets the word across 12 destroyed planets, but hey-ho, to find any spacefaring vehicle they can muster, get as many survivors on board as it can hold, and flee into space, and the protection of the remaining Battlestar and its small fleet of colonial Vipers and their pilots. There is a ragtag fleet, and on the run from the Cylons, they intend to set upon a long space journey to find the mythical 13th colony, otherwise known as Earth to you and me, and thereby adopt a new home for their poor homeless selves. All good. So far, the epic plan quickly starts to encounter some issues, which they might have thought of beforehand you'd have thought of. So, distinct lack of food, fuel and water and medical supplies.
Yeah.
And staff.
They didn't have much time to plan, did they? It wasn't like they were going...
No, they didn't sort of think, right, we're going to be bombed. Everyone get your suitcases of fuel. So anyway, with the lack of those things, obviously it leads to starvation, crime and death across the fleet. No. So they need to find somewhere they can restock. Now, this would mean you'd need to still carry all of that fuel and food, and eventually it's still going to run out because anyway, it doesn't matter. A new Council of the 12 is somehow elected with Adama on board in some manner. Because the old one worked out so brilliantly, of course. And they decide that the whole fleet should visit a planet called Borealis that has everything they need, but is almost certainly a deadly trap, as it's probably home to a Cylon task force, according to Adama, and they're eagerly awaiting them, of course. So Apollo, the son of Adama and the commander of the colonial Vipers, suggests they visit an alternative planet, Carolon, which, by the way, is a really good antiseptic cream lotion in the UK. Anyway, it's just an aside. Of course, Apollo's plan is stupidly dangerous. And by stupidly dangerous, I mean ridiculously so, because they need to fly the entire fleet through an area of space that is A, mined heavily by the Cylons, B, renders all their laser weapons useless, and C, blocks them from seeing anything. So Apollo and his co-pilot, Buddy Starbuck, intend to fly in front of the fleet, clearing a path through the mines with space torpedoes, even though they can't see anything. Okay. good plan.
Yeah, I'm off to Borealis.
Good plan, yeah. I think I quite like the Borealis plan, but okay.
I'll see you later.
See, good luck with that plan of yours. Well, once they get through that, of course, they make it through there. They reach the intergalactic casino world of Carolon.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's basically Vegas in space.
Yeah, Space Vegas. Yeah, Spagus.
Spagus.
Which is ruled by human locust-looking creatures called Ovions. And here, Adrian, things with this story reach a new level of stupid. So I'm just going to kind of summarize them because there's quite a lot condensed in here. So, though it's not clear how or why, the Council of the 12, the new Council of the 12, decide they're going to declare peace again with the Cylons and lay down their arms as a tokenistic gesture during a celebratory awards ceremony for Apollo and Starbuck. And they're getting them through the mines, space mines, and the blind lasering and all of that.
Well, they've earned that reward. They did quite well. It did get quite hot in those Vipers.
It was melting the cockpits, apparently. Anyway, bear in mind, by the way, the Cylons to this point have no idea where the humans are or any reason to be on Carillon. Okay, so unless Cylons have a penchant for space casinos, why would they be there? Anyway, hold that thought. The Ovions, it turns out, have been kidnapping visitors to their casino and taking them to the lower chambers to use as food or incubators for their larvae, which is quite gruesome. And it turns out the Ovions have been in cahoots with the Cylons for reasons. We don't really know why.
We don't
Something
need to
do
know
with
why.
them, letting them have the people as food. I don't know. Anyway, sensing a trap. No shit. Adama hides his fleet of Vipers on the surface of the planet, gets loads of people to pretend to be pilots at the award ceremony, and then eagerly awaits the Cylons to play their dastardly hand. Meanwhile, Apollo and Starbuck find the Ovions' lower chambers, rescue some people, and go head-to-head with some Cylons, inadvertently setting fire to some Tylium, which, it turns out, is a highly combustible elemental fuel that, once triggered, starts a chain reaction that will blow up the entire planet. I'm thinking there should be warning signs dotted about around that, but there you go.
Don't smoke. No smoking.
No smoking. No running in the corridors, and no shooting the Tylium with laser pistols.
Yeah, no bombing. No heavy petting.
Anyway, surprise, surprise, the Cylons spring their trap and attack what they think is a defenseless fleet to all fool them. Adama springs his counter trap and the Vipers launch from the planet quickly, because remember, the planet's going to blow up, and destroy the Cylon raiders. Apollo and Starbuck surmise that there must be a Cylon base star, which is their kind of mothership nearby, possibly hidden from their space raiders because of its proximity to the planet.
They're crisps.
I'm sensing the space raiders. They are space radars, yes. And also, of course, I'm sensing that the radars of the Battlestar perhaps need an upgrade if they can't see a giant spaceship just round the side of a planet. Not much use, anyway.
No.
So Apollo and Starbuck zoom across the surface of Carillon using fake military call signs on their space radios. It's all true. To confuse the incredibly technically enabled and futuristic cyborg army of the Cylons into thinking they are under attack from several battalions of colonial Vipers by just calling them out with different colours.
Purple squad, innit? Orange
Purple
squad.
squadrons coming, these different squadrons. The ruse causes the Cylons, again, just for reasons, to retreat closer to the planet's surface, which by now is, of course, at critical mass. Anyway, the Vipers zoom away, leaving the Cylons, as well as the Ovions, their children, and all of the casino staff and attendees to burn to death in the resulting planetary explosion. The fleet is saved. Everyone important is okay. Now they must remain on the run from the Cylons and continue the quest for Earth. That is Battlestar Galactica. Complicated things going on in there.
It's only complicated because that stupid second half. It's ridiculous. Oh, yes. And some believe. You've also, don't forget as well, that opening section, some believe that they are the ancestors to the Mayans, or the Toltecs, or the Egyptians, or someone. Or who are they?
Who are
There's just a list of ancient civilizations.
Exactly. The ancient civilizations of Toltec.
Toltec, yeah. I know, it just goes on for just listing them all. Just pick one and be done with it.
Blessed are the Toltecs. Never heard of them.
Yeah, you're all right. The film gets stupid as it goes on. I do, however, the first half is, okay, we can see it coming a mile off, but it's the scheming of Bolter, the slow dawning on Adama, the resulting destruction, flight away to space. I like all that. That's well done. That's good. It's the second half where it all falls to insect larvae pieces.
Yeah, and of course, what we've got to remember a little bit is that, as with, well, actually slightly similar to Buck Rogers, but the Battlestar Galactica pilot film that they released kind of is a condensed. They've condensed quite a bit into that, so there's quite a lot of episodes crushed down. I think three
1-hour episodes, wasn't it?
Yeah, originally. So they've crushed that down into an hour and a half, cozy hour and a half. So there is some parts that are pressed, to say the least. But you know what? It was the pilot episode that we saw when it came here. So.
Well, to be fair, it was the pilot episode. They actually released it originally in the cinema in the States as well. This was the first thing that went out.
Wow.
As far as I'm aware, I could find that this was the 2-hour thing that went to the cinema in the States as well. So this is the first taste that people had of Battlestar, and then the 3-hour version was released on TV later. But yeah, that's all right. What scores are we giving this? What do we think?
Well, I think for me, the story of Battlestar Galactica, as crazy as it is it just kind of just repeat. So they're all wiped out. They get in their spaceships, go away, go onto another planet. They're all wiped out. They get in the spaceships and clear off.
Yeah.
So it just kind of does the same thing twice. At least Buck Rogers has a kind of sense of daring, heroic adventure about it. So and it does have that kind of. It is kind of more of a Star Warsy vibe. It has a key beginning, middle, and end, whereas Battlestar Galactica has kind of a beginning, middle, another beginning, several middels, and then it's kind of deviates in this really weird scenes that don't need to be in it. A triple-mouthed singer springs to mind for no reason, really. So,
you forgot to mention the singers.
Yeah, and then, of course, the enemies themselves, the Cylons, they are a good enemy in Battlestar Galactica, but they are just kind of, they don't really do a lot in that.
Well, there's 3 of them to a ship. They're crammed in quite tight.
With their Venetian blind windows. It always makes me laugh. They're always sat behind Venetian blinds, it always looks like to me. But anyway, yeah, so I think if we're going to rate these out of 10, I think for me, Battlestar Galactica probably gets maybe a 6.
That's what I've given it as well. I've given it a 6.
And what have you given Buck Rogers?
I actually thought the story to Buck Rogers was really weak. I mean, there's nothing to it. He sort of arrives, there's a crap story about putting the pirate thing on. He goes for a walk around a ruined city, and then they go for a dance, and then nothing. Oh, it's something about pirates and food. And then he just solves everything by stupidly just putting mines on every pirate ship that then no one thinks to stop them leaving. In the sequence. They're like, maybe if I fly out, I'll be fine.
Boom.
No,
I thought we cracked it with that one.
Yeah, and there's loads of stupid bits in it. I don't know. I don't know. I gave Buck Rogers a 5.
Maybe you're right. I think maybe a 4 or 5 then. Okay, well, I'll settle on a 5 if you've settled on a 6.
Yeah.
But
I think the thing with Battlestar is, I think the first half, if you just stuck with the first half and then carried it on like the two do later on, instead of going for the stupid thing, it would have been higher. Because I really do like the idea of being double cross, legging out into space, trying to find something. I think that in and of itself is a good core thematic story to put something around. What it's not something to put around is the story of an intergalactic space casino with human eating insects.
For reasons.
And that's where it falls down a bit. And a whole planet that just is so unstable that smoking a cigarette near a pool will blow it up.
Yeah, there's a lot of lights and light bulbs in that casino. Any one of them could pop and cause a fire, and that's it. That planet's going under.
And so much nylon. There's so much static electricity. Anything could have set it off. Absolutely.
It did not take them firing laser weapons. That was a fire risk from day one. Note to self: never build a space casino on a volatile, dangerous planet made of thallium.
No,
that thing's going to blow.
It is literally a ticking time bomb waiting to go off.
It is.
Yeah, don't need a Death Star to wander past and blow it up. Someone with a cigarette or just a passing match, anything.
Absolutely. Okay, yeah. So then, if that's the case, then our story scores are Battlestar Galactica gets a 6. Buck Rogers is trailing at the moment with a 5. Interesting. 5, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's move swiftly on now, and let's take a look at the performance and characters of these marvelous, marvelous shows. So, obviously, the main character of Buck Rogers is Buck, this time, in this instance, played by Jill Gerard. Or is it Gil? Is it Gil or Jill? Gil. Doesn't matter.
Poor old Gil.
Gil. Poor old Gil.
Gil's that again.
So, Gil Gerard plays Captain William Buck Rogers. We've also got Erin Gray, who was, I believe, a Miss America, I think.
Quite possibly.
Before this. And she plays Colonel Wilma Deering. We've got Tim O'Connor as Elias Howe. That's Dr. Howe. He's only in it for the first season, I think. He doesn't make much of an appearance in the second season because of the crazy problems they had with the second season, which we'll discuss later. Pamela Hensley, of course, as Princess Ardala. Henry Silver as Kane. He's only Kane in the theatrical pilot, so he's only in the pilot. Henry Silver, it's changed in the later series. Felix Seiler is Tweaky. That's the physical performance of Tweaky, who does nothing but walk around shaped like a Robocock. And Carrie, of course, Dr. Theopolis. So Mel Blanc does the voice of a few things in Buck Rogers, but he is principally the voice of Tweaky. Because, of course, aside from the beegies that Tweaky does, which are expressions of excitement or danger, I guess. I don't really know. No one really understands that language apart from Dr. Theopolis. He does actually speak periodically, and there is a reason for that, which I'll come to. Howard F. Flynn, by the way, was the voice of Dr. Theopolis in the pilot only. His voice was changed for the TV series, although, in a really peculiar coincidence, the guy that did the voice in the actual TV series sounds exactly like Howard F. Flynn as well. It's kind of creepy.
That is creepy.
So I think when it comes to the way the characters and the performance are in this, there's a really weird interplay between the characters. Buck Rogers, Jill Gerard, Buck Rogers, he kind of aims for a manly persona and kind of this buff dude, although he's 70s buff. So he's kind of pudge more than buff. And he's got chest hair, and he's kind of just a big block of space meat, really. But he actually comes across in the pilot episode as kind of weirdly camp. So he spends the initial part of the pilot, because they drug him, don't they? They give him, space painkillers for some reason, because he's in so much pain, clearly. So they give him space painkillers for his headache, which sends him into a crazy high. So he goes kind of space high.
He does.
And then his performance throughout the whole TV pilot seems to sort of be an interplay between kind of camping it up a bit and acting kind of 70s disco camp, and also trying to be James Bondy a little bit, Stan. Mm-hmm. What there isn't is no Star Wars-y type characterization of him. So he's not like he's trying to play Luke because he's a bit too old for that. And he's kind of maybe a bit Han Solo-y, maybe, but a bit roguey, but he still doesn't really come over that way. Erin Gray, however, starts off being a really interesting, strong female lead and is quickly reduced to a simple, sexy sideshow for Buck's affections, and she just pouts all the time. Tragedy, really, isn't it, that? Yes. So her character starts off really interesting. She's the commander of the space fleet, whatever they're called. But it doesn't matter in the end, because she's just like, she's basically, for at least 3/4 of that, after she's met Buck, just either pines for him or calls him an arsehole.
Yeah.
She
flip-flops. She tells him she's going to be all woman for him from now on in.
It's just such a fall from powerful grace at the beginning. She stands there giving it some, in a sort of very old, stupidly tight-fitting outfits, but we'll come to that. Anyway, so she's reduced to the kind of sort of a target of Buck's affections and mostly pouting all the time or wearing very shiny lip gloss. Pamela Hensley, however, who plays Ardala, so much lip gloss. Pamela Hensley plays her character in next to no clothes for most of the time.
Oh, don't ruin my costume section.
No, just saying. So she plays it obviously with very powerful sexual ardor. Ardor. Is that, how is it pronounced? Ardor, sexual. I've written it ardor.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. Anyway, so machismo. So she has that, and that's kind of her weapon of choice. She spends most of her time eyeballing men and measuring them up for their sexual prowess, whether it's Kane, whether it's Buck, whether it's Tiger Man. Because, of course, Tiger Man gets horribly rejected for no reason. I felt his pain. Tiger Man just gets, no, Tiger Man, don't you be looking at me, Tiger Man, you bloody giant Tiger Man. No, this isn't for you. So no, you're not going out.
Tiger Man, you're barbed.
Stupid Tiger Man. So she basically plays that as a character in this. So she plays kind of the sexy part of the triangle between Buck and Wilma, and of course then there's the princess. And Buck you never quite know where Buck's affections really lie. Even at the end, you don't really know. He's just kind of spends a lot of time dancing with her. He's in bed twice with he spends a lot of time with Tweaky, actually, chatting away to him. So the babble talking Tweaky, actually, as you now we come to mention it, is quite an important character in that he is actually just a walking transport for Dr. Theopolis, because that's all he seems to do, walk around and transport things. Dr. Theopolis. And my question to you, Adrian, is this. Why in the future have all important choices been handed to clock-shaped AIs?
I don't know.
That need to be carried around by penis-shaped robots? You'd think Who made that choice?
You would think as well that considering like the doctor tells him, he says, oh no, they programmed themselves. They did it all themselves sort of thing. They'd make themselves feet.
It's true. That when Buck's trial is a triumph of stupidity in that show, when he sits there with a robot with a necklace defending him in front of a room full of animated clocks.
Do you know what Tweaky is, by the way? He's an ambiquad.
Is it what?
It's called an ambiquad.
Okay, I thought he was like a bit like a Lego man, but
I don't know what it is, but supposedly, according to what I've read, his thing is called an ambiquad. So he's whatever the species he is.
I'm not sure, but I do know that, of course, as we've said, his character in this and Dr. Theopolis tends to be, generally, he's a really supportive kind of character for Buck. He loves Buck from the minute he meets him. Dr. Theopolis is all over him. Don't hurt Buck. Oh, I don't believe it. Buck can't possibly be a spy. I've met with him and discussed things with him, and he's really nice. He's kind of saying that all the time. Wilma's like, no, he's not. He's a bloody space pirate. He's like, no, I don't think you're seeing what I'm seeing.
Well, she does say that for the first about 2 scenes, and then suddenly, I'm very sorry for being mean to you. Kiss.
Yeah, and then you're going on trial for being a pirate, eh?
Yeah. But I'll
then
break
you're going to
you
get
out.
banished. Yeah, then he's sentenced to death, I think, isn't he? Anyway,
he is sentenced to immediate termination.
Immediate termination, which doesn't happen, of course.
No, because he gets sent back to his cell to wait for it. That's not the definition of immediate.
Don't trust clock-shaped AIs. I'm telling you, they don't have idea what they're talking about.
Clock
Especially
eggs.
when they're periodically, of course, as we said, Tweaky does speak, and that, by the way, is only there because they thought that his beegy sound was too similar to R2-D2 in Star Wars, so they needed to give him a voice. Hence the reason why periodically does weird impressions of Mel Blanc doing an impression of a Looney Tunes character. What's up, Buck? And, what's up, Doc? And you may as well say it anyway. So the performances here flick from being angry to sexually aroused in a heartbeat. Remember, this is supposed to be a post-apocalyptic Earth. Buck never really seems confused by his surroundings and quickly adapts to a future where no one he knows is actually alive. He instantly knows how to pilot a spaceship from the future, better than the existing pilots who've been trained on that specific piece of machinery, and quickly assumes a military role in spite of everyone's suspicion that he's a traitor and being sentenced to death for it. So in terms of characters, those are the main characters and the performances that are in the show, and they're certainly in the pilot. There are some side characters that flip in and out. People like Dr. Elias Hower, he's kind of the interplay between Dr. Theopolis as Buck's friend and Erin Gray's character as Colonel Will Maderian. And it's not really clear where he sits in the scientific elite. He's kind of an elite scientist, but it's not really clear. Remember, this is post-apocalyptic Earth, so they've actually been trying to rebuild the Earth, and they've put this defense system up and everything else. None of that really comes across with the characters who spend most of the time in about 3 or 4 locations and periodically wearing either smart uniforms, and the uniforms and stuff, and we'll come to that, are quite smart in Buck Rogers. But they wear those smart uniforms, periodically just going to gigs and dancing and doing stuff. When it comes to piloting their own spaceships, they're awful, terrible. And the characters that you see, Star Wars style, Red 5 standing by, the moments there where you see the pilots in the cockpit, that's very much borrowed from Star Wars, those sequences. And Battlestar perhaps does the same, but you don't know a lot about those characters because you know what's going to happen to them. Boom, shakalaka, boom, shakalaka. Most of them just get totaled.
It's going to be a very particle effect explosion as they fade away.
That's my assessment of the performance and characters in Buck Rogers in the 25th century. They're a bit sexualized for a kids' show. One's for the dads, definitely. Certainly the opening sequence was. So I don't know. My feeling is that it's all played a bit soft and it's not too offensive. And I think what they were going for was they were going for sort of trying not to make it too scary or too difficult to get into. Then they wanted a kind of a friendly sci-fi face. And I think the Captain Buck Rogers, played by Gil Gerard, is kind of okay. I remember liking it when I was a kid. I remember thinking, I'm going to tune into Buck Rogers because it was cool. But I think that was more because of the spaceships and the laser beams and all that. More so than if I'd have realised now and look at it with the lens now, I think, oh my God, it's horrific. But I did have a real thing for Erin Gray, even as a younger person, because there's something very alluring about her and her crazy shades of lip gloss.
Just many shades.
Many shades. It's a book. There's actually a book called 50 Shades of Erin Gray. Anyway.
What did I think? Tiger Man, Princess Kane. Not Princess Kane, but the Princess Kane. They're all great. I like them as characters. Twiggy, Dr. Theophilus, I'm all on board. Buck's the weak link for me. It's supposed to tie it all together, but I just didn't buy him. And Erin Gray as Will Maderian, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The editing does her no favours because she has whiplash U-turns of character. It's just, and there's no subtlety. It's like, oh, son's death. I don't believe you. I don't believe him. Oh, Buck. It's literally that.
Do you see me as a woman?
I'll be all woman for you now, Buck. And he sat in the back of the cockpit and go, what? Yeah,
he don't care. He
doesn't.
About that.
For me, and I think you're right, there's a sense they don't know in this, and I get it, it's for telly and it's 1970s, but they don't know whether to play this full-on camp or serious.
Yep.
And it shows throughout, I think. And that was the problem I had with this. It doesn't, you can't play straight with a character called Tiger Man. You simply can't. You have to full lean into it. And Henry Silver as Kane, he's full on bullshit or not in this. He's proper,
he's always pissed off.
He's always annoyed, always, with whatever she does. And she's just
everything annoys
whatever.
him.
Yeah. And, and then he's the one who gets all in the neck when the princess's dad turns up through hologram at the end.
Oh, God, I forgot about that. Yeah, he turns up, doesn't he? And has a rant.
Proper rant. We'll come to him in a bit, but good lord, it's a real mishmash. But there's not that many characters. They're a bit all over the place. But like they either should have gone full on into the kind of like what they did in Flash Gordon, where I think they embraced the campness a lot more in Flash Gordon.
Yes, I agree.
Or they should have played it like this. So I'll move on into Battlestar. So you've got three main characters really in Battlestar: Captain Adama and the pilots Apollo and Starbuck. So Adama is the commander of the Battlestar Galactica. He's the one who sees he doesn't trust the Cylons. He's told
with good cause.
And he's told by the president, look, your old vengeances, your old prejudices will be our undoing. No, it turns out he's spot on the money, and his growing realization I really like. He's played by Lorne Greene, so fresh from the prairies on Bonanza and things like that. But Lorne Greene is a dependable, solid, elder statesman, serious actor at this point in time, and he gives the role all he's got. It's very serious in this deep baritone voice. He's very serious. He's in charge of everything, and you get that feeling from him. So he's a solid linchpin around what everything else thinks. He's not always like that. There's a few bits, but in the first half of this, the good half, he's really good. You've got Apollo, played by Richard Hatch, who weirdly would turn up in the later Battlestar show, but we'll come to that in a bit. He's the leader of the Blue Squadron of Vipers. So the Blue Squadron, so not purple or orange, who don't exist. He's also Adama's son.
What do you mean they don't exist?
Don't know.
That's how easily you can be fooled. No wonder those Cylons were fooled so easily.
Just call them different colours. Yeah. Mauve Squad. Any old squad. Beige Squad.
Pink Squadron.
He's also Adama's son, and I think there's a notion he's quite serious as well, but he's impetuous because he's under the shadow of his father, and you get that in this as well. Not so much as you do in the later series, but you get that impression that he is Adama's son. So that daring plan in the second part of the film, and all that. So he's a bit more impetuous, a bit more outgoing sort of thing, and that's sort of brought out of him by the third character, who's Starbuck, played by Dirk Benedict. So Dirk Benedict's character Starbuck is impetuous. He's a womanizer, and he's Apollo's wingman, basically. He's also a gambler, and as I said, he's a womanizer. It's a thing for all the ladies. Any lady he can get his hands on. Dirk Benedict, will probably, if you don't recognise him from this, it's the same part he went on to play in the A-Team. He's literally the same, almost the same character, apart from he's a pilot there. He's a womanizer, isn't he? And he's the face. Yeah. He's called Face, isn't he? So he's there for his pretty looks, and that was the whole point. So these three are the sort of core central team of the show, and around them everything plays out. There's loads of different characters that bounce off them. So there's Boomer, there's all these kind of different characters, but around them the story sort of revolves. So they sort of solve stuff. Adama is the one who has to try and navigate and sort out the problems that leading all these spaceships. I think there's 200 odd spaceships surviving there, and he's trying to lead this ragtag fleet across the universe. He's the one who has to give them hope that there is this mythical 13th colony of Earth, and so it all lands on his shoulders. But he's Lorne Greene, so he can handle that. He's cool. There's loads of cameos in this as well for people you'll recognise. There's loads of favorites. Jane Seymour.
Yes, she is.
She plays Apollo's love interest. I can't remember her name, because remember, this is the 70s, and most of the women's roles are defined by how they are around men. So you get that, a lot of that. The main sort of driver of the character in this is the men, and that's it's the 70s. It is what it is. John Colicos is the treacherous Baltar,
he plays it well.
He does play it well. It's very funny in the opening sequence. Oh, I can't believe the Cylons would do that. they don't trust us. We shouldn't send others out. And then they go, we're being attacked. Baltar, what do you think?
Baltar? I love that. Baltar? One of my favourite bits is
he's just gone.
There's a fleet of ships aiming towards us, possibly a Cylon welcoming committee.
Yes, Adama. What are you talking about?
That makes sense. That makes sense that they would send out a welcoming committee of 1,000 warships. Yeah. Talking about
your welcoming committee is shooting at us. Baltar, what do you think to that?
Well, he says, should we raise? Can we at least raise our shields? He goes, no, that could be seen as a sign of attack.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, okay. Yeah. Let's not raise the shields then. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. It's all very silly, but yeah, he plays it well, and then he just disappears. Also, as well, we've got Ray Milland as Sire Yuri, who I bet he must be the inspiration for the hedonist bot in Futurama.
Oh, there's no doubt about it.
It has to be.
Absolutely has to be.
What are you doing? When he first comes in and she's got just having some kind of I'm not going to say orgy, but there's something going on, or it's probably the precursor to some shenanigans.
Some inference that there's some kind of adult party going on the old spaceship there.
And they're like, oh, you've got lots of food. I trust you're not going to break up this party. It's like, God,
relax and have some grapes.
Oh, I made it a spot. But the good thing about this is, like I said, it's a solid supporting cast all around. It's all played pretty much straight.
Yes,
I think, and that helps to sell the story, especially in the first half. And my main complaint with it is then that gets at odds. We get the odd insects and that stupid plot in the second half, where it then becomes like you can see it's turning into a serial of the week.
Yes,
which is what happens. And with a lot of these TV shows, you have a really good opening, and then it's, well, we need to keep this going syndicated week upon week, and we see what happens. I also do want to mention here the sarcastic Cylon at the end, because he's brilliant.
Cylon.
He's just amazing when the Grand Supreme, because there's a Grand Supreme leader of these Cylons as well.
The Imperious leader. It's Patrick McNee. It's the Imperious leader.
Imperious leader, and he goes, what's it he says? He goes, how could they know of our surprise attack? And the Cylon just looks up and goes, I guess it wasn't so surprising.
Our readers are all destroyed.
All destroyed? How? We took them by surprise.
Apparently it was not as big a surprise as we had hoped for.
It's, like that. It's just a sarcastic Cylon. He's like,
brilliant.
Oh.
Sarcastic silence. He can afford to be when it's Imperious leaders on a chair 9 feet in the air.
Yeah. Well, how do you get up there?
Why is he up there?
Why is he up there? But yeah, he's ace, that sarcastic Cylon. And for him and for the seriousness of it, yeah, I really like that. What about you?
There are some characters I like in that. I actually really like the character of Apollo and Starbuck, as you rightly point out. They play their roles particularly well, and they just stick to them. So Apollo is the kind of, and they do play out that first part where obviously Zach is Apollo's brother and the other son of Adama, who's killed by the Cylons as he's trying to get back to the fleet to warn them. That's when the show is at its greatest. That's such a brilliant moment. Even though there's characters then that are crying with absolute horror what happened, and then 2 scenes later they're having a party. So things that affect people for long in this show. They don't dwell on things. But I suppose if you're running on on a spaceship running away from deadly enemy Cylons, you're going to just party all the time if you can. I like the character of the XO, which is Colonel Ty, because he's quite an important character in this. Although he doesn't do a lot in this particular pilot, other than kind of either agree. Well, he either agrees or he just generally agrees with Adama. And there's a really funny sequence when they've had no real interaction other than Adama telling Ty what to do, mostly, where they just meet in a spaceship for no reason really, and just conjure a plan. But for some reason they just meet in a spaceship, so they can't be heard by anybody. It's like, well, why would you need to go to those lengths anyway? It just seemed odd. And let's face it, if you're in a Battlestar, the last Battlestar, and you're the commander and the colonel both disappear, you're going to start asking questions about where are they going? What are they swinging their lead? What they're doing? We need them on the bridge. What are they doing? They can't just disappear for a chat. And then he starts stealing uniforms, and he's made into some kind of weird comedy sort of sidekick. Again, this is second half when it all goes pear-shaped. Prior to that, his main role is to look at Adama with kind of a glowering kind of, oh my God, what we're going to do kind of look, and wait for a decision to be made. The female characters in it, like you say, Jane Seymour is one love interest. You've got Cassiopeia, who is for a short time Starbucks in love interest, but he's also, and I can't remember the other role there's another woman in it who plays a role of she's sort of a radar operator / love interest for one scene / all of a sudden there's a scene on the Carillon where there's kind of a jokey scene where they both sort of,
is it Lieutenant Athena?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because she's meant to be Starbucks' girlfriend, and I don't know,
she sets him on steam.
Yeah, that's right. She steams him when he's getting a bit steamy in the steam area of the wherever they are. There's some kind of steam jets required in that steamy bit. Don't go in the steam room for a bit of steamy naughtiness. And then later they have a bit of a confrontation in the casino when they both show up on a date with Starbuck, and he's actually sort of trying to play one off against the other, and it's unnecessary. So I say second half, that's like, it all gets a bit silly, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. I do like the Imperious leader for the exact reasons you mentioned. A, because he's just a grumpy man in an armchair, well, grumpy creature in an armchair, really. He's permanently given bad news all the way through. It's just bad news all the time. There's no right. We've won. It's brilliant. This is great. He's like, bad news. One of the Battlestars has escaped. Oh, damn it! Baltar's let us down. Oh no, we've tracked him to a planet, but now it's blown up. Oh, come on. Now we're under attack from, it's like, what? And how many Imperious leaders are there? Because if he's on that one Battlestar that gets blown up at Caroline, there must be like, I don't know. It's not too much debate this, but they are interesting characters, and I really like the Cylons. So yeah, I agree. I think some good characters in there. I think if we're going to have to rate them, and I suppose we have to.
We have to.
What sort of scores are you thinking of for the performance and characters of Buck Rogers, for starters?
Well, I was, for Buck Rogers, where did I put that? Character performance, I gave it a 6, just for Tiger Man.
Yes, I could actually go with that, actually, I think. I actually read it written down as a 5, but I'll go with a 6 because there are interesting characters that do appear in there, I suppose. And you don't have really stupid throwaway characters like the bloody William Hyde White appears weirdly in both Buck Rogers and Battlestar at certain times. Of course, he's in the second version of the Cats of the 12 going, oh, that's a great thing to do. Let's have a party. So I agree.
Well,
what about Battlestar?
On that note, Battlestar's a 1. No, I actually really like the Battlestar character, so I gave it an 8.
Yes. I'd given it a 7, but I'll compromise with an 8 with you because I agree. I think they're equally good. So if we look at the overall performance and character score, Battlestar Galactica scored an 8. Buck Rogers again trailing here with a 6.
Gonna have to pull it back in the back half, isn't it?
It says it's going to have to try and do something because it's not looking so good, is it?
Nope.
Okay. So, moving swiftly on, as we have to do, we're going to now take a look at the sets and costumes that exist in this marvelous sci-fi universe. So let's get on and do that.
Let's talk about Buck Rogers, and we've said about them in the characters, or I did. If we're talking costumes, then you've got to talk Tiger Man and Kane first of all. The double bill of evil, decked out in tiger print and gold and black lame, glorious. It's literally glorious.
That's the way of the future. Those are materials that the Draconians cherish.
I know, tiger print and gold and black lame. And when I'll speak about it, there's the princess and her lack of wardrobe throughout. It's hard to,
yes.
You're actually talking about negative costume there. That's what you're talking about with the princess. She's either in the bath, leaning on the side, or what she wears for the dancing sequence is just
very
ridiculous.
Skimpy. Very suggestive.
Skimpy, yeah. I mean, in other sequences, she's fully dressed and things like that. But when she goes to town, she goes to town. I can only gather that it must be very warm in space, but it's not. It's cold. So they must have some serious heaters on those ships. The outfit for the good guys, I thought they were a bit bland. They look like rather dull naval outfits with a really high back neck collar. It's like they're really scared of getting to a bit of whiplash to that high back collars there. I did, however, like the black formal wear with its red sash, which they wear for the dance sequence when they go there. And it fits Buck's dancing at the disco when he's dancing both with a ball and under a metaphorical disco ball. There's lots of ball dancing going on.
The ball dance.
And special mention must also be given to the princess's father, King Draco, I think his name is, who turns up via hologram in the latest gear from the Genghis Khan collection. It's like, what is going on here? Why is there a race of whoever these are out in space that look like the Mongols?
I don't know.
The Mongol hordes. I don't understand it. As for the sets, I don't think there was a lot of money spent on that department.
No.
There's lots of flight bays, white-walled rooms, and then there's the room with the disco in. So I don't think there's much. I mean, the next bit may go into special effects, but if we're talking sets, I did like a couple of the matte painting shot, which are quite nice. So when they're looking over the city, when they're on that one shot when they go outside in the city, they're just overlooking it. That's quite nice. And it's also good when he goes out to the ruined city of Chicago, or whatever, and the shot of the city in the background, and then the ruins. I thought they were quite nice matte paintings, so they're quite good. So they look all right. There's not really much to say, though. It's obviously shot on a budget, and you can probably count the number of sets on one hand. But I suppose, the story is quite self-contained. They don't need to do a lot. So it just fits the story they're trying to tell. So there's not a lot, the costumes, they all wear the very similar sort of thing. I mean, Buck's opening costume is just a grubby astronaut. Well, it's just a grubby suit, one-piece suit. And then he gets
dirty
dressed
NASA
up
suit.
Yeah, then he gets dressed up in the official wear of the thing, of the whatever they're called. The white suit. And then he gets the black-red sash thing, and then he looks like a pirate at one point. It's nothing amazing. There's no particular, I don't look at this and go, there's some good design for these sets and costumes here. But, got Tiger Man.
Yes, that's true. Tiger Man and Kane. For Buck Rogers, I agree, actually. I mean, you can't really judge it by what Princess Adala wears, because she doesn't really wear much or anything, really. And, of course, Colonel Deering basically goes from wearing white to I mean, in this pilot, she just wears kind of one-piece kind of spacesuits, not spacesuits, but, quite snug fitting.
They're like naval outfits, aren't they?
Basically naval outfits. Weirdly, their space helmets have a weird widow's peak on them, which is really strange. So they have kind of a pointy peak.
Yes.
But other than that, they do have kind of a sort of more of a traditional pilot's look to their space costumes, and there's a naval tradition in them, like you say. But like you say, for the enemies, they're all kind of just, for me, they're Genghis Khan / samurai, and they've all got kind of samurai helmets. I'm not quite sure why.
I reckon it's what they found in the back lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think they went to a back room and they just discovered, hey, guess what? There's 60 samurai outfits here. Well, they'll do. Draconian samurai, same difference, space samurais. So yeah, there is that. And any other costumes are kind of they kind of function in that space. There's no derivation though from it. They're either in sort of formal dress, the white, so the formal dress with the blue, the white outfits for just day wear, I guess. Yeah. Because even the science guys all wear the same thing. And Book wears a variation of those depending on whether he's imprisoned or whether he's being, let loose or whatever. And the Draconians, well, like I said, they're space samurais. The only variations, of course, is Tiger Man and Princess Adela, who kind of wear crazy shit. Because at one point she's wearing like a inverted, horned, hairy hat, which looks like a sort of a chandelier, while she's dancing around in a space bikini. All very, very strange. But that is, I agree with you. Sets-wise, they are really limited on Buck Rogers. And that's actually something I didn't realise till I rewatched it for this, how limiting there are. Because other than Deering's office, which seems to double up as Buck's prison and the other science guy's office, and his questioning room. Else. And then they just turn the lights off for the trial, because that's the same room, I'm pretty sure, just for the trial. And then you've got the sort of bay of the Draconian spaceship is the same. You see it from about 5 different angles, and they're all kind of the same. Mm-hmm. Other than Ardala's bedroom, which is just a bed, or a swimming pool, which is just, I'm guessing they just went to a spa and filmed for a day, I think. And just put the lights on, on red for sexy red mode. Tonight,
more lip gloss.
Tonight on Bug Rogers, Adala goes into the red room. And then the rest of it, like you said, the only scene where there's actually a lot of people and a lot of stuff happening, because everything else is quite enclosed, is of course the magnificent ball dance with the ding 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 ding, where they just the dance is half turn left down, put your hand in the air with your ball, half turn to the left and raise your ball, lower your ball and raise your ball. So, and of course, as we said, Buck Rogers masters that in seconds before gets them to get down and boogie. But the sets are very limited in there. And that's different for Battlestar. So to just mention the way it works with Battlestar, that was actually for its time quite a big budget. And they had a fairly extensive range of costumes and sets, most of the action, of course. So outside of the visual effects, most of the action of Battlestar itself is either the bridge and the crew quarters. So generally locations upon the Battlestar Galactica itself. And I think where you see the other spaceships of the fleet, they're kind of just corridors lit differently from the same angle. So they don't vary that much. I mean, one of the corridors is basically it's a space bed bunks corridor where there's just loads of people on bed bunks. So that's the bed bunk spaceship. Like that's the bunk spaceship. With the exception of the one where they go to the party room, but you don't really see the party room. You just see that guy sort of sat in his chair going, "Have some grapes. Why are you here? You're not stealing my food." So when you see the Battlestar Galactica, you tend to see either the launch bays and the launch windows. And there is some full-size Viper craft in there. So they've obviously built some important stuff in that bit. And, of course, then you'll see the actual bridge of the Battlestar Galactica itself, which is a bridge for a spaceship I really, really like, because it looks like a big space bridge with a great big viewing window and loads of people, all looking at their computer screens and stuff like that. I quite like that about that. Mm-hmm. So the first half, and you don't really see a lot of you see from the Cylon point of view, you see the Imperious leader on a giant chair, and Cylon's looking up at him through the glass door room that he lives in, and you don't really see anything else inside of the base stars at all. You see the wider shot of that, but that's more visual effects. And then, of course, the interior of the Raiders ship is like a 3 Cylon craft, isn't it? Where they're lit by what looks like one bright light outside of some Venetian blinds. Yeah. Where you've got 2 pilots at the front and 1 at the back. Why it takes 3 pilots, and it doesn't matter, let's not talk about it. You don't see the Cylons actually remain quite a set mystery. You don't see a lot of them or about them. which is I quite like that. And later, of course, it's kind of ruined in the second half when you introduce the stupid planet, the space casino planet, which just looks like a well-lit, it's not really a casino. I don't know. None of the games in that casino make any sense anyway. And they just throw these little tiny little, I guess the currency, what they are, is like little squared gold squares. So the qubits, I think they're called. And it's like, hey, look, I've got a full pyramid. Hey, qubits for everyone. It's like, well, and I think the point of it was that the Ovians are letting everybody win so they can trap them in their space caves for food and all that. But anyway, so the sets that you see there, that you see on Carillon, which is the only other main location, there's a slight exterior location, nothing exciting. It's kind of all dark, so it's clever to film the exterior location of the planet in the dark, so you can't see anything really. And then the interior, of course, is either Space Casino, which is just, I guess, probably is just a casino just lit with space lights. I don't know. And then there's the mysterious
normal
lift.
Lights.
There's the mysterious lift with the strange dot control system, and where you go, I want to go to the fourth floor, please. That's 4 dots, boop, instead of just the number 4, which would make more sense because there's only so many lights of that system you can have on a panel because there's only so many. You can only like 8 floors. If you've got 20 floors, you can have 20 dots. It's like too many dots.
Well, you're going to have more than 20 because you're going to have 20, then you're going to have 19, then you're going to have 18.
That's what I mean. So it started with 1 dot. The panel for the controls of the door would be about 8 meters long. Which floor do you want? Oh, I need to floor 64th floor. Oh my God, we're going to have to climb down the ladders for that one. It's way down there on this massive space lift. Anyway, and then there's the underground caves bit, which is not what you'd call great. It really all falls apart. It's a shame, really. So the sets generally on the Battlestar are good. Everything else, you don't see the Cylons, and then everything else is kind of a bit of an afterthought. Costumes-wise, there's an odd aesthetic to the costumes. The uniforms of the Colonial Viper Squads, kind of a tan brown leather flight jacket, which I thought looks kind of cool. Very Han Solo-y, actually.
Yeah.
But oddly Egyptian-looking helmets, and I couldn't tell whether they had
Well,
they've got like a pharaoh design on them.
Don't forget, they are the ancient forebears to one of our ancient civilizations.
So I'm guessing that's what possibly Egyptians are. Maybe they're Toltec helmets. It's all Toltec technology. That
Toltec.
Toltec.
That's where they got it from.
And they've got like a pharaoh like quality to the design. So they've got like the pharaoh death mask kind of with the sort of gold side. I don't know what you call them, but you get the idea of what I'm describing. They have no visors, or at least I couldn't see if they had visors, which I imagine is quite an issue. But then again, maybe it just avoids endless amounts of space fog.
I imagine if the windscreen goes, you've got more things to worry about than just having a visor.
If it depressurizes, you're dead meat, aren't you? So your face is going to get sucked out of that mask anyway. So that and the mainstay of the costumes, you see the colonials, other than when they do they go to their awards, they go for their dress costumes, which look exactly like their ordinary costumes, but with longer sleeves. So I'm not quite sure what the plan there was.
Don't forget the half cloaks.
Oh, of course, the stupid half. I forgot because Boxy, the little brat, wears one, doesn't he, with his stupid robot dog.
Stupid half cloak.
And I completely forgot about the robot dog when we mentioned the stupid bloody characters Anyway, so they do have this sort of these dress costumes. And the officers all kind of wear a blue variation of the same thing, more of a sort of formal blue, again, naval tradition type costumes, wearing their pips and their various sort of, banners and things and their rank. The Council of the 12 just kind of wear bed sheets. They just kind of wander around in bed sheets, just like they're a party gang. They just wander around wanting parties all the time. Let's just have a party. Come on, have a pie.
They're just working from home.
Tea and biscuits.
They just never get dressed.
The tea and biscuits. I want a party. Come on.
I'm Rayland. I'm Sayori. Make me some tea and biscuits.
Make me some tea and biscuits. I want to declare peace because we needed more parties needed.
Some grapes.
And then female costumes in this, generally speaking, they're either there's only the 2 main characters in it. 3 main characters. Jane Seymour kind of wears, I guess you'd call them space traveler clothes. So she just dresses for space travel. I mean, she's not really wearing anything spectacularly glamorous. I think there's one moment when she's wearing something more glamorous, and Apollo sort of, you look kind of different. I've never seen you like that before. But Cassiopeia basically wears kind of sort of light, sort of.
Well, she's a socialite, isn't she?
It's dirty socializer.
Socialite.
A socialator or something. I can't remember. But she wears kind of not skimpy clothes, but light, sort of, relatively skimpy clothes, I suppose. But all kind of in foils, bright, shiny colours. Then when they bump into the woman that comes out of the casino, all excited, she's wearing some kind of flowered, feathered headdress and dressed like some kind of dancer in Vegas. I don't understand the costumes of the space casino. It's bizarre. But those are the mainstay of the costumes. Are they any good? Well, And of course, the final costume to mention there is the Cylons themselves, who are shiny. Now, them Cylons are shiny. I mean, that is shiny.
Shiny and plump.
Their commitment to shiny and clearly, liking their bread and pizza.
Wait, loads of it. They're like barrels. They're so wide across the middle. They're walking like, they're like Gamorrean guards.
No, they do sort of humph about, plodging heavily.
I don't know how they fit 3 in a Cylon Raider.
Well, it's just a good job they've discovered anti-grav, because when they get in, it goes.
Shift up. Would you shift up? Shift up. I can't fit in.
Turn up. The anti-gravity. The wings have just hit the floor.
Could you put your seat forward, please? I can't get my legs in.
How many burgers did you have for tea? So yes, they're heavy, very shiny. I like it. I mean, I admire that commitment to being that shiny. Because every time they're lit in the show, they're properly shiny.
I know who buffs them.
Well, that's this. I came to the conclusion that of utmost importance to the Cylons is A, human genocide, and B, shiny armor, like polish. I mean, they even have little swords, don't they? They have, for some reason, they have little swords, and they also have little Roman skirts as well.
So they're kind of like weird Romans.
Well, they call them centurions, don't they? So I'm guessing there is a. Someone said to him,
yeah.
"What are these Cylons?" He goes, "Oh, we're calling them centurions." And he's gone, "Centurions? You mean Roman? And of course, that's why they've got that thin strip across the middle of their head. They've got that thin metal strip across the middle of their head, and they carry the mini sword like a proper little dagger. What do you call this Roman swords? I can't remember.
The gladius, isn't it?
Gladius, yeah. And they've got the little capes, not the capes, the little skirt things. So yeah, costumes for the Cylons. You don't really see the Imperious leader as such. You see the back of his head and his giant space collar, because all good villains have a giant space collar. But that's all you really see. And Boltar, of course, because he's the dastardly evil one, he has kind of a green and black outfit and a sort of, and he always looks kind of one step away from putting his finger to his mouth, Dr. Evil style, going, Cylons. But of course, he comes a cropper, doesn't he? Because he falls foul of the Cylons for not delivering the peace treaty and the double cross, and so he ends up with his head on a block as well in a mysterious scene.
But you never really, you don't see the aftermath, so I presume he doesn't die because he comes back in later episodes, doesn't he?
He does come back in later episodes, yeah. It all gets very strange in later episodes. No point in, going over I suppose, now because of the planet. But it does get very weird when he confronts Patrick McNee. But let's just, I'll leave that with you for your imagination of why that even happens.
Yeah.
So, sets of costumes then, Adrian. We've got to make a decision. The decision has to be made. What are you feeling about the scores on the doors?
Well, I mean, for Battlestar, just to say, I'm pretty much similar with you. It's very military. There's lots of silk and flowing stuff for the civilians. For the sets, I'd like to look. The Galactica looks a bit new. Everything looks a bit new, so I'd like a bit more wear on there. And
I just forgot to mention there is the scene on the planets when you see them being bombed by the Cylons. So there is some set work there, which is
there is.
I guess they're models when you see lots of buildings collapse in, and you do see that dog get squashed, which is kind of mean.
It is kind of mean. I thought the Grand Theatre, the Supreme Leader, wherever he is, I thought it looked like the inside of a cinema.
It does look like a cinema.
He's got a big screen behind him.
So Get out, Centurion. I'm trying to watch my new film.
I'm trying to watch this film in massive cinema scope.
Is it an IMAX?
Mostly I just hate those half cloaks. I just hate them. It's neither one thing nor the other. A cloak just to just above your lower back. It's not a cloak. It's just a jumper tied around your neck.
Yes, unfortunately, you're right.
That. They look awful. However, I think it's okay. I mean, I gave Battlestar a 7 for this. Where did you land?
Yeah, it's exactly the same scores. I gave it 7.
So we got 7 for that. Where did you land for Buck Rogers?
I gave it a 5. I'm afraid
5. Okay, I gave it a 6, if only for Tiger Man and Kane.
Yeah, we could compromise if you like and give it a 6. I'm happy because it's still low at the Battlestar regardless. So at this point,
yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. Okay. I think it's just Battlestar had more money.
Yeah, and I think that is genuinely the rationale here. I think they did have more money, and it was, I think, a little bit more premium, and certainly had a little bit more weight put to it. So yeah, absolutely. So there's our scores. I'm afraid Battlestar Galactica romping away with it again, with its shiny Cylon glory, and coming in with a 7. Buck Rogers in spite of all their ball dancing and all of ding, ding, diddle, ding, left and up with the ball.
To the right.
Despite all of their fancy dancing and fancy pantses and costumes, it is just a bunch of space samurais, isn't it?
It really is.
They did just find those. They definitely found those in a skip at the back of the film lot. So, Buck Rogers, you score a 6. You are trailing, Mr. Rogers, trailing in this battle. Goodness me.
Let's see if things can change in our next few battlegrounds. Should we move into music and sound effects?
I think it's very important because these are now coming up to the kind of key things about these shows. Of course, all these fancy things have costumes and stories and characters and all those things, but we're coming up to some of the things that really sold it to the audiences around the world right now. So let's talk music sound effects.
Battlestar. Okay, the main theme is great. It's great. I'm not going to, if we talk about cracking opening themes for a science fiction show, then this piece of music, dun, 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 it's great. It's an iconic sci-fi theme that works perfectly. Stu Phillips composed it. It's performed by the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra, and it sets the tone from the opening. Dun, dun, and then the way it sort of just kicks into the main fanfare theme. Brilliant stuff. I think what they've obviously gone for here, they've asked for something in the mold of John Williams.
Yes.
They've said, look, listen to Star Wars, and it was Superman out at this point, may have been, I don't know if it was or not. Listen to those, and that's what we want. We want something along the lines of that. And that's the thing. The only problem I have is that it's a shame it doesn't last for the entirety of the opening credits. It just runs out. It just stops about 3/4 of the way through and just starts again. So it's like, duh, duh, duh. Crap.
How long did you say this needed to be?
Did we play it too fast? It made me laugh loads because then it's like, and then the credits end and it's just him going. You see him, conducts him going, oh, stop. It's very odd. It doesn't ruin it, but it's, it's funny. When I watched it, it made me laugh. And so, yeah, that theme tune is, like I said, it's iconic. It works. It's a supremely good sci-fi anthem. It would probably be on sci-fi hits albums done by Jeff Love and his orchestra.
Yes, so I don't doubt there's a version of that somewhere.
It would probably been discoed up at some point, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
So, it is really good. The rest of the music, though, it's all right. Typical soundtrack fare, really. But it does get really dramatic in some places for no real reason. The first point where Apollo and, what's his name? His brother, when they blast off, Zach, when they just blast off into, because they go on the patrol, the music's dead tense, but they're just flying off.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Like, what's going on? Something's going on, but nothing's going on. I also think as well, that do you think Zach is really annoyed that he's not got a cool call sign?
Yeah, I think he's I'm not sure quite what happened to that character, really.
No, they just needed some sort of, they needed some pathos, didn't they? Someone's got to die.
Yeah, so and it's going to be him.
Yeah, sound effects. So yeah, the soundtrack is okay. That main theme is what sells this yes. From the get go. But the rest of it, it's all right. When it does come back, it's nice when you hear that main theme. When it comes back at certain points, it's always good to hear. But the rest of it, there's nothing that really stood out to me when I was watching it as going, oh, that's a good bit of music. I like that. Sound effects are all right. They fit well. There's got some great whooshing noises as the Vipers launch.
Yeah,
that noise as they launch out of the launch tubes. That's quite good. The laser sounds get old pretty quickly, and if you don't get old here, then Buck Rogers is going to
hang on to your hats.
Yeah, and the explosion sounds as well. Yeah, it's all right. Those sound effects are all right. However, what it does have, though, I know we were laughing about it earlier, it's got the voices of the Cylons.
Yes, it does,
and the laser eyes moving back and forth, and just as a bit of visual iconography. We'll see that influence down the line. Things like Knight Rider would nick it and things like that. And that red back and forth and just that.
Yeah.
It's just cool. It's just a cool touch. And it makes them really menacing. And then couple that with that voices that I think they've probably used some kind of vocoder out there.
A complex vocoder set up for that, yeah. So
there's a vocoder style effect in there. They really sound like robots and they sound utterly inhuman. Apart from the sarcastic one at the end, but there's a sense of menace to them, and that's really good. And I think that coupled with the theme is what really sells Battlestar to me from a sound effects music kind of point. Yeah, I just those of it. The rest of it, it's just good sci-fi noises. Nothing stood out as terrible, but nothing stood out as amazing either. I don't think those things. What about you?
Yeah, with Battlestar, I mean, obviously, I love the opening theme because it is great. You know, right? Even when you get the sort of and you get Patrick Nee. Some believe, you know, they were wearing Toltec hats, but they stole from the Toltec warehouse on Toltec, the planet Toltec. So there's that, and then there's obviously that, you know, the big ramp. It's an iconic theme. I mean, they even use it. I think it even gets used in some films later down the line. I think Airplane 2 uses it a little bit when they have a. The opening credits of Airplane 2. I'm pretty sure use the Battlestar Galactica music. So it is iconic, and there is that. Now the music, the sort of incidental music, is a little bit weaker, isn't it?
Yeah,
because it goes from either. So it has this kind of diddly diddly music when things are kind of getting a bit crazy. So they, you know, and it always kills me every time they introduce the silent you get the da 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 bum 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 bum. You know, this kind of dramatic drop in sort of chords. You need some like Rick Beato from the music center to tell you exactly what chord progression. It's a minor sixth diminished fifth chord to a whatever that is, but it does that. So it's kind of a variation between that. Sometimes you get the excited version of the main theme. So you get a lot of that kind of thing in Battlestar Galactica. But the key takeaway from all of that is it's obviously all based around the main theme, and it's cheap to do it like that because they just don't have to create lots of music. They just it's all about economies of scale with these TV shows. They're not films. They don't have nearly the same budget, certainly not at this time. So they do reuse what they can and reuse the themes. And all right, the main theme does get away with it. Sound effects wise, well, yeah, you're going to get sick of hearing them. They're the same kind of lasery, shooty sounds. Sort of, at least this is I think the first place you'll encounter them. You might have encountered some in some Roger Corman movies, I suspect as well.
Probably.
But the kind of good laser shooting sounds and all the kind of sounds you kind of expect. Nothing you don't. Obviously blowing up sound effects, the launch tube sound effects, when these sound hauntingly familiar when we come to Buck Rogers. They're all okay. Nothing too bad about that. But as you rightly point out, the greatest triumph here is those Cylon voices. They are incredible. There's actually a series of YouTube videos, which we'll link in the show notes for this, where a guy tries to recreate those. And it's actually really, really complicated because some of the technology they use in the studio to recreate the Cylon voices is crazy. It's crazy complicated to do. It's not just like they plug it into the Cylon voice machine and go, there you go. There's about 9 different vocoders and tricks and all sorts to get that Cylon sound effect. And even now, because some of the technology that they use doesn't exist because the studio binned it or got rid of some of the
I imagine a lot vocoders. Of analog weird
exactly
stuff,
and the nature of analog, of course, is that no two analog machines are really kind of the same, so it's very difficult to recreate digitally. But I'll put the link to those things. But their voices are amazing. They're my favorite thing about it, and the eye sound. They're my favorite thing about this whole thing. That I think the Cylons are a great enemy, and that really makes them their voice totally. It's totally robotic and cold, and they're just endlessly following this kind of programming. This, they say by your command at the end of everything. Would you like a cup of tea? By your command. Would you like a drink? By your command. It's like, just stop saying, but they can't. It's this. I love that automative, robotic control mindset of them. Even though the Imperious leader is obviously some kind of well-spoken English thespian, it doesn't matter about that. You've got those Cylons, and they are cold sounding. That robot voice is I think it's as easily as powerful as the Daleks in terms of a robot voice in a deadly enemy character. Certainly brilliant. So they do have that. Moving on to Buck Rogers. The opening theme of Buck Rogers for the pilot is a song called Suspension. It was composed and conducted by the same Stu Phillips who composed the Battlestar Galactica theme, and it was performed by a person called Kip Lennon. Now, I don't know how much you know about Kip Lennon, Adrian, but did you know this? He sang the Michael Jackson songs in the Stark Raving Dad episode of The Simpsons. So due to contractual obligation at the time, Michael Jackson wasn't allowed to sing those songs, but he did do the voice of Leon Kompowski, I think the character was
the
called.
guy in the
mental asylum.
Yes.
But when he sang Lisa's Birthday and the other couple of songs, Happy Birthday, Lisa, that was actually Kip Lennon, the guy that sang Suspension. And of course, the Suspension song in Buck Rogers, Far Beyond, awful, horrible intro music, awful. And the opening sequence is just plain weird. So,
and then some.
I mean, it's a theatrical release. I get it. And so they clearly ramped up the sexy for the dads in the theatre, I think, because it's just Erin Gray and Ardala basically rolling around on the floor with books, sort of, and another character you'd never see again.
There's 4 or 5 different women in that.
I was going to say,
sequence,
just rolling around on the floor in sexy clothes. And periodically kissing Book and like rolling around with it. Yeah. It's really,
also rolling around
really weird.
on a massive Buck Rogers sign.
Yeah, it's genuinely. It's just
his name in massive letters on the floor.
It's really weird, and it's not the same one that made it into the TV show either. The opening credits for the TV show are completely different.
Good.
So because they have him sort of this image of Book sort of animated falling to the earth and 500 years later and all that. To cue the clock spinning forward and all that kind of thing. So you don't get any of that here. It's just it's kind of a sexy kind of show. It's like a hot gossip show, or Legs and Co from Top of the Pops just decided to do an intro for Buck Rogers in the 25th century. It's going to get a little blue. So it's a bit saucy, that, isn't it, that opening? And then the rest of the sound effects in there, well, they're kind of borrowed from Battlestar Galactica.
Yes.
So almost every sound effects in this is basically Battlestar Galactica. Well, they are basically Battlestar Galactica. They are exactly those. The launch tube sounds, the flying spaceship sounds, the inside sound of these spaceships, all the laser gun sounds across the whole lot. Every sound effect in it is the same, exactly the same as the one in Battlestar Galactica. Even when the spaceships do flybys after they've heroically blown up one of the Draconian pirate ships, you get the exact same flyby sound. They sound the same. So economies of scale being what they are, and this being produced by essentially the same person, that tells me that there's a reason why. And also some of obviously the sound being created probably by the same team that created the Battlestar Galactica. They clearly put all of their effort into Battlestar Galactica, and then when Buck Rogers' production team came, have you got any sound effects? And we have some of our own sound effects. No, you could just use these. A laser gun's a laser gun, right? They're all from Toltec anyway. What does it matter? So just So for me, in Buck Rogers, you don't have the same level of sound design that you do in Battlestar. So you do get the laser sounds, the launch tube sound, which, by the way, is now my launch tube sound. I can't. Someone said to me, it said the word launch tube for me in Spaceship. I think of that. I think that kind of that sound effect. I do. I just can't help it. All the vehicle explosions and space explosions are all the same, recycled from Battlestar Galactica one way or another. So there's no real. I don't think they invented any new sound effects. Of course, it does have its space disco, which is unique to Buck Rogers. There's no space disco. In all fairness, they try and match it, don't they? Because Battlestar Galactica, in the casino, they have the triple-mouthed singers, the trio of singers. So the 9 mouths of the singers, which I think it's some kind of homage to some Motown singers. I don't know what they were thinking of when they made that. It's really weird. They sing this really odd song where at the end, one of the singers does a note, sings a note so low that it shatters someone's glass. But only one person's glass. Not only can he sing at that note, he can target specific people's drinks. He should have been on the X. He's on the equivalent of the X Factor at the time. So, and then in a weird twist at that point, Starbuck tries to almost book them for some purpose I can't identify, because what's he going to do with them? He's going to act as their agent in what universe? He's just left 12 colonies have all been nuked. And he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about booking you for my wedding. How much do you charge? I don't know. It's just very weird. So they do have that. But Buck Rogers counteracts that with its space disco, where Buck goes into the dance, and of course they're doing the did the ball down, diddle it left to the left and up with the ball. And then he goes to the people playing the music, the live band, and then challenges them to get down. So, he just says to them, go, let it go. You've got to let yourself go.
Just let yourself go.
Fingers go with the music. Just let yourself go with the music. They're coming in with this first step. Ding, diddle, ding, ding, diddle, doo.
No.
Let yourself go. And he's like, okay. Diddle, doom, diddle, doom, diddle, doom, diddle, doom. To which, obviously, Buck starts getting down and getting funky, and challenges Princess Ardala, and he says, don't get involved if it scares you. She's like, nothing scares me. She starts doing a slinky dance, and she's like, diddly-doo, and everyone's getting down and getting into it. The room fills with that, people just dancing. They have no idea what that is, that sound. It's like, sit there and quote, that's weird. What is that? They all just instantly know that it's a 4/4 disco beat from the 70s in the US, circa 500 and plus years ago. It's time to get down, which is weird.
It's a pretty good guess from that pianist.
Yeah, it could have gone to any, could have been anything, couldn't it?
500 years worth of music. Just let yourself go, get down. Okay, I think you want this.
Can you imagine if you just started playing Chaz and Dave? Rabbit. It's like, no. Let yourself go. Okay. We're in the army now.
wonderful life.
Gold, always believe. No, there's no time for that. So I don't know. I don't know quite why they picked that particular thing. I guess, it was of its time, wasn't it? It was late
very much
in the disco era, but the whole sequence is weird, but it does have that. It completely sticks out, though, in Buck Rogers, in the sense that scene is almost pointless. They're not sure quite what purpose it serves, other than to get Commander Deering all worked up about Buck and his dancing, because she says it's disgusting, and then the next beat she's like, Buck, do I need to do more of that?
Yeah.
I can dance too, Buck.
Oh, her character is so ruined. Ruined.
So that's my take. What about yours on the old...
Yeah, it's that theme. I can't get past that theme tune. I've been trying to... Since watching it, I've been, giving it some serious thought and trying to rationalise it in my head. I just can't. I can't rationalise that tune, the use of it. The only thing I can think of is that they were going for some kind of James Bond style opening.
Yes, I think that's exactly what they were going for.
But it completely misses the mark. It recalls to mind that terrible opening theme to Star Trek Enterprise.
Yes.
In the way that was completely rubbish, but it's never something you want to be reminded of. I'm sorry if any of the listeners actually, like Star Trek Enterprise and that theme tune, but for God's sake.
No.
And like you've noted, they're the same sound effects as the lasers in Battlestar, aren't they? So,
yep.
Apart from that disco scene, which obviously we've just chatted about, but, it is what it is. Aside from the main theme, the disco, it's all pretty forgettable. There's nothing really much in there. The lasers are nicked from Battlestar. I don't rate the sound, and it's not. It doesn't work for me. I couldn't get past that theme tune, and the disco tune is stupid. And but to be fair, the only bit I do like is the ding 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 ding.
The ball dance.
Yeah. Because it sounds like the beginning of another song. Ding, 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 ding. Live a lonely life. Sounds like that.
It does sound like that, yeah.
Is that
Ace of Base?
Ace of Base, yeah.
Do you know, I'm surprised nobody's reduxed that scene with just try different sounds and songs to see what would go with it. I might do it myself. When they're all doing the you could put all sorts of songs to that.
You could, and you should.
Try that. I might have to do that.
So what are we scoring these then?
Well, I think the clear... I mean, I gave Battlestar Galactica an 8 because I love the sound of the silence.
Exactly what I gave it.
So I think I was in agreement with an 8. Poor old Buck Rogers, though. I gave it a 4 because
I'm happy to. I gave it a 5, but yeah, on further rationalisation of the opening theme tune, it doesn't deserve anything more. And they use it over the end credits as well. It's a double whammy.
They do.
It's bookended. Yeah. The film is bookended by that nonsense. I'm not having that. No, 4. Oh dear, it's not doing very well, is it? Battlestar way out in front. It's going to have to be It's going to have to be a Wilmer Daring whiplash U-turn for Buck Rogers to pull this one out of the fire.
I know. It's been horribly beaten. It's quite brutal to watch. He's just being slapped down. Dr. Theopolis ain't saving him now at the minute. Although he's rationalising.
I think Buck Rogers is far better. Shut up. Shut up, you.
Twiggy. No, don't you interrupt me, Tweaky. I've told you about that.
Let's move. Right, visual effects. Should we get into this?
Yes, I think it's visual effects time.
All right. Do you want to do Battlestar first, or should we do Buck Rogers?
No, I'll start with Battlestar this time. So obviously these shows are about their visual effects, and they're all obviously coming off the back of Star Wars and Silent Running, and there's a whole slew of films. Now, the brains behind the visual effects for Battlestar Galactica was John Dykstra. John Dykstra was previously responsible for films like Silent Running. He worked with the guy that made Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Doug Trumbull, who also did Star Trek The Motion Picture. And of course, he also worked on Star Wars. So the guy had an incredible pedigree of doing visual effects. And around 1979, he left Industrial Light and Magic, which he was a part of course, with him being part of Star Wars and Lucas and all that, to form his own state-of-the-art VFX company called Apogee, believe it or not. So he created Apogee. Apogee is still going, I think. Although although that might be under other guys. Anyway, so his first major project with Apogee was the original Battlestar Galactica, in which he also served as a producer. Now, I didn't realise that till I came to look that, John Dykstra was a producer of Battlestar Galactica. So months before any actors signed to do Battlestar Galactica, they began working on a series of all the effects for the various series. That included creating 45 spacecraft, the Muffet costume, which is the robot dog, the Ovians. I wouldn't say that was a successful costume for the Ovians, but
no.
I've got an Ovian here. Should we ask them, what did you think to your costume? Well, who was asking you anyway? As well as the optic effects for the Vipers, obviously, and the Galactica itself. So there were over 300 separate effect sequences that were created for Battlestar Galactica, which actually beats the number of effect sequences that were in Star Wars by about 15%. It's incredible, isn't it? And prior to and that's obviously prior to the remastered versions and all of the new stuff. Now, many of the effects that you see in Battlestar Galactica are reused.
Well, yes.
But the actual visual effects themselves, they're all obviously based around using giant models and using motion-controlled cameras to create that kind of visual effects. So a technique that was pioneered and mastered really during 2001: A Space Odyssey, and that came to be the way you made those things, and obviously Star Wars and everything else. So John Dykstra obviously became a bit of a master at utilizing that technique. So he'd created a more viable way of doing that by obviously creating a much simpler variation of doing those light passes so that you could create them a lot quicker, which of course the demands of TV were. So what they did was create a big library of stuff that they could use. So they obviously shot certain sequences like the Cylons sort of forming a sort of I guess you'd call them an attack pattern. Yeah, I was trying to think of the word. So forming an attack pattern, then you'd obviously have them swooping down and turning around and flipping over, and just, that idea of there being a space battle akin to this kind of Star Wars space battles. And obviously the entire iconography of what this is about is built around that Star Wars idea, trying to capture some of that. So the Vipers, there's no accident that the Colonial Vipers look a lot like X-Wing fighters from Star Wars. The Cylon Raiders, well, they kind of look like Frisbees, a little bit like upside down Frisbees, really. But they do look quite nice. They're actually one of my favorite sort of TV spaceships. They look brilliant. They do look like flying saucers, but at least they have a kind of purpose and direction. And I've always liked one thing about this is the economies of scale are very good in Battlestar Galactica. So the Battlestar Galactica stuff looks massive, and when the Vipers come out of it, they look kind of small. When the Raiders, the Cylon Raiders emerge from the mothership, the base star, they all kind of flood out of the base star. And sometimes it looks like there's maybe two or three, but they do at least, there's quite a consistent pattern to them. Obviously, in that opening sequence, you see kind of a planet. There's some genuine attempts to create some really good space effects. So when you see a planet, you see that. And it's a much bigger jump up from things like Star Trek, which perhaps people would have been used to at this point. So Star Trek was considered quite ahead of its time in terms of VFX at the time. This really upped the ante and all of that. So this was film level visual effects utilized in TV, and something which set the benchmark forever. And actually, TV really nowadays, of course, thanks to these pioneering shows like Battlestar Galactica, the effects that they use in TV shows now are the same ones that there are in film and TV. They don't do a cheaper version, something the UK science fiction teams didn't learn or utilize till a lot later than the Americans did with their shows. So of course, they had a bit more money in the film studios and everything else, and the space. So the special effects in Battlestar Galactica, in terms of the visuals, the Battlestar itself are great. The space battles are really good. There's lots of fly passes. For the first half of the film, you see, or at least because you've seen them maybe once or twice at this point, so you don't mind them so much. As it starts to get more towards later on the battles, the battle towards the end of the pilot, all of the kind of space shooting sequences, you've already seen them all in the beginning part of the battle. So you've kind of seen them all before. And so it's the same thing. You're going to see one Colonial Viper in the foreground, one in the background, and a Cylon Raider, and he's going to do, and you're going to see one shoot and the other one fly through the smoke, and you're going to see all of that, and you see it loads. Every time the Vipers launch, you get that kind of bip sound. You see it from the sort of POV, and there's lots of POV of which I think are the cheaper effect shots, where you see the POV of the pilots from the outside of the Viper looking in through the cockpit, because it is just clearly what the same Viper used over and over again, with different people sat in it and different lights on them. And handily enough, there's very low lighting inside that cockpit. You do see the space handle, which has a gyroscope on it, which always confuses me, because in space there's no horizon. So I don't quite get why a gyroscope's going to help you. You're never going to know whether you're straight, because there's no real basis for it. You could be upside down. You're not going to know.
That's true.
That's
no
what
gravity,
I suppose. You'd have a planet there, I suppose. So you'd be like, if the planet's, but would it matter? I don't. Anyway, I like the fact that they've got like a turbo button. I'm going to hit my turbo button. Why wouldn't you just fly that fast all the time? I don't know. Maybe it's just a fuel thing. I don't know. But either way, they do have that, and they have that kind of the jet flame shooting out the back. All those tropes of sci-fi shows that have, because even in Star Wars, you don't get the little flames in that shooting out the back of the spaceships, which you do in Battlestar. There's little details that you don't get. The fleet, well, it looks to me like someone landed on an Airfix, found about 500 Airfix kits in the back of a cupboard and has glued stuff together. And because some of those spaceships are really weird designs. I mean, Battlestar Galactica itself is a great one, but there's one that looks like 3 plates sat on top of a plank. Some of them are clearly borrowed from other shows. If you look carefully in the background, you'll see. Even though they said they created 45 spacecraft, some of those spaceships are from Battle Beyond the Stars, because the Space Moose is in there. If you look right in the background, and a couple of the Sador spaceship from Battle Beyond the Stars is in there as well, with the stellar converter intact. So there is a lot of that. But you get the little shuttlecraft. But those visuals are good. Even on the planet, then the laser effects are all kind of good. They kind of seem to have got the way of doing those, because Star Trek didn't have these kind of things. But they seem to have got the way of doing the sort of laser beam effects from Star Wars really quickly and easily for TV. It must be the technique that once they'd figured out they could do it quite cheaply, they just did it all the time that way. So they actually look pretty good. And then, of course, the spot effects. Actually, I think some of those are the weaker ones. When you see the explosions as a result of things or people getting shot, those effects are where it's at its weakest.
Yeah.
But the visually, in terms of the spaceships, the Battlestars, and all of that, I think it's brilliant for Battlestar Galactica. It really is an amazing thing. And it's what sold it to me when I was a young nipper watching this. It was like, this is just as good as Star Wars. And in my mind, it was as good as Star Wars. It didn't, for me, have any difference, albeit now I look at the story and the stupidity of it all. I think, why was there a space dog anyway? And that stupid character was, I'm not even going to talk about the robot dog. It's pointless with its radar ears and its pointlessness. It bites the ankle of a Cylon, and that brings the Cylon in. It's like, not my ankle. That's my one weak spot. How did you know? Oh, my ankle. Never bite a Cylon's ankle. Oh, the pain.
Oh, my ankle.
So, but what about you? I mean, that's my take on the visual effects. I think they're brilliant. But what about you?
Yeah, I don't have much more to add on Battlestar. Interestingly, there's a quote from him, John Dykstra, on IMDb, where he actually specifically talks about the reuse of effects on Battlestar.
Oh, wow.
And he says that the problem is that when there's a hole in the dramatics, the tendency is to fill it in with some special effects. Unfortunately for them, I didn't shoot enough special effects to have spares lying around to fill in holes with. I shot all the shots I said I was going to shoot, and we got all of them in the show, but we ended up having to use some of them a couple of times. So,
didn't they just?
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's also how he became a producer on it as well. It's just because he wanted to drive his car on the lot and get a parking spot. That's it as well. But it's weird. There's a couple of quotes from IMDb. No, I think it's great. I really like the designs of the ships, the Star Vipers. I like the Cylon Raiders. Yeah, they look a bit like plates, but I think they're good. The tube departures are good. It feels more cohesive. It feels really, so there's a cohesive whole to this. It feels like two things at war. They've both got their own designs for stuff. Yeah. The base star is different enough from the battle stars. Everything looks separate. It looks nice. I really like this. I do think the weekend, again, like we said, the latter half where you've got the repetitive shots, the insect creatures and the larvae stuff, that's all a bit, I don't give that. Yeah. That's not so great. But I do like the space stuff in Battlestar, and I think that looks really cool.
Yeah, because the base star on the planet, when it gets too close to Carillon, in that crappy laser effect where it gets too close, I'm like, just blow it up now. God's sake, blow it up.
Yeah, that's really not good.
Bad.
That is really bad. As for Buck Rogers, I don't think John Dykstra had anything to do with Buck Rogers.
I thought it was the same effects.
No, I'm looking on IMDb. He's not linked to it in any way. I'm looking through all the credits. So it's down, the special effects are down to Bud Ewing and Jack Fagard.
Okay.
Who, as far as I can see, worked on nothing else, according to IMDb. Jack Fagard worked on a few other things: Quarantine, Weekend of Terror, The Big Fix, Somewhere in Time, things like that. But nothing particularly major. But yeah, so I think it's a different. I think they might have nicked stuff, but who knows? It's Glenn A. Larson Productions in it, so
well,
he owns the footage.
Yeah, he owns it, so he can use what he wants.
Yeah. So I mean, this starts with the Frozen Book in his Ranger 3. Which obviously looks suspiciously like a space shuttle. So they've just gone for a space shuttle design.
Yeah, very popular at the time, though, weren't they?
Well, they hadn't actually launched by this point. There hadn't actually been a space shuttle launched by the point this came out. But they had been designed, and they were around. I think they came.
They were big talking. There were loads of talk about them, weren't there?
Yeah, so I think the first space shuttle launch was just after this. But we're very much in 70s American TV sci-fi as influenced by Star Wars. There's lots of star fields, there's lots of black outlines on the craft and models and things like that. There's map paintings for distant views and overlaid lasers everywhere. It's that. We're getting that look. We know kind of what you said. And as you rightly said, what we also have got, there's a reuse of shots and there's a reuse of props from Battlestar Galactica.
There is.
the Terran starfighters were an original design for the Vipers in Battlestar.
Makes sense.
So there's a lot of that going on. I don't think there's particularly a lot of memorable. There's not a lot that is memorable in the effects of Buck Rogers. The big green force field that they used to move his ship, which when he announces it, had me laugh my head off. I can't remember what he says. He says something like of get the ship in the force field to get it, or some crap.
Yeah. It ain't good.
None of the ships. I don't particularly like the whatever the Will Daring, and they're all flying. They're not great. They don't stick in my memory.
I'm sure what they're called. Yeah, I can't remember what they're called.
Even the Draconian flagship, it lacks any real kind of identity. I don't know if they tried to make it look like the head of a dragon or something, but it looks like a series of steps up a temple.
They did. Yeah.
From the front.
It looks a bit Lego. I thought. I used to make things like that out of Lego when I was a kid, like giant spaceships like that, where it was just like loads of little bits bolted on everywhere.
Exactly. I think this is just another thing that there's just not as much money spent on it. So I think there's a real economy of scale here that tells in the design, the use of shots, the amount of them. There's some we mentioned earlier on. There's some nice matte paintings,
there is,
which are good and which are good to see. And you don't really get them in Battlestar because obviously they're not on any. The only shot we see on a planet is the bit where they blow it up that city, and then the bit at the end, which is looks awful. But here, the matte paintings are really nicely done. I thought they were really cool, and so that's probably the standout in my memory of those. I was like, oh, that's quite. I looked at them again today, and I was like, you know what, they're all right because
not bad.
I thought they were pretty good. But the ships and the main special effects, there's not much here really, is there? It's not. It's just a bit. I don't know. Maybe we're just seeing diminishing returns in this kind of thing already. By the time this comes out after Battlestar, you watch Battlestar and you're like, this looks iconically cool.
Yeah.
But Rogers just looks like it's trying to ape that of thing and doesn't work. And doesn't work. And it's probably because maybe that the people doing it are just not as good. Not as good.
And I think there is a little bit. I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said that the trouble is I don't think anyone was taking it too seriously enough when they were making Buck Rogers. So it kind of comes through in all of the things that are in it. The performances, the costumes, the characters, the visual effects. They're all a bit sort of tongue-in-cheek. There's a little hint of that somewhere. It's like, don't do it too seriously. No, it's Tiger Man, for God's sake. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're going into Thundercats territory.
They are, actually.
I mean, it's earlier than Thundercats, I get it, but who thought when they write this? I mean, is he in the original stories? I don't know, maybe he is. So, maybe this is the whole point that it's, but like I said, we'll see this similar sort of style of thing in Flash Gordon.
Yes.
Obviously, and they camp it up completely. And for better or worse, I don't know, but I think this is neither one thing or the other. And like you said, that just sits with the effects as well.
It does.
Not good enough. Anything to add on that?
Certainly with Buck Rogers, I think it is all down to budget and as you say, the scale. I do like the design of their spaceships, but you see the same footage, even more repeats of the same footage than you do, because there's not a lot of space battles. And one of the space battles is a disaster for the Colonel and her men, because she basically gets them all killed by sticking to their autopilots, which is kind of a bit of a nod, I think, to Star Wars in the turn off your flight computer, Luke. So I think there's a little nod to that. And obviously Buck's like, you just need to fly by wire, fly by the seat of your pants. Instantly knows how to control the spaceship. There we go. I'll just fly this perfectly and be able to shoot everybody. How does he even know how to use the weapons? Anyway. So I always like the spaceship design. They're Ralph McQuarrie designs, aren't they? So all of the ships in Buck Rogers are principally based upon Ralph McQuarrie drawings at some level.
Yeah, because they're Nick from Battlestar, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so they've got at least a sci-fi brain has sat there and thought about them at some point. But the actual mechanics of doing it, there's only so many barrel rolls you can do.
Yep.
In a victory barrel roll, and it gets a bit silly. And then there's that weird gateway thing, the shield, whatever they call it, the defense shield, which it's never really explained what that is or how it works or why they need to bypass it. It's just, we've put it up a defense shield. It's like, well, it didn't, at a certain point, clearly it didn't help because half the Earth's destroyed. So your defense shield was maybe a few weeks too late in the switching on.
Yeah.
But either way, those effects are particularly weak. And they are really the only VFX in it, and the rest of it's in set, on set stuff. And obviously laser beams and laser guns and stuff like that, but they're not great, are they?
No.
Really, though. Even those, you do get the impression if you took those visuals away, it would be hilarious to watch Buck Rogers and when we're just pointing and do and all that, because they must be doing that in their heads. They must do it. If you're shooting one of these shows and the VFX is going to be added later, you must be making a do noise in your head. I would be. I'd be like, do, you're there, do. I would. So I think that, and it sort of shows in that, because I think the reason you don't see a lot of battles, because remember, the Buck doesn't go around shooting everybody with his laser gun. He just puts bombs in the tailpipes. It's the banana in the tailpipe gag.
Yeah, literally.
Just, years earlier. repeatedly. And it's like you said, I love the fact that they just keep launching regardless. Anyway, it's like, maybe this one will be looking, boom. Why do they keep blowing up? What's going on? Who's blowing these up? This is dead unfair. This is well unfair. Let us have a chance. So no, I think the VFX in Buck Rogers, and they don't really change. The fact they reuse almost all of the same visuals throughout the entire series. It gets by the end of the series, you kind of, you see one space, but you know what you're going to get because it's going to look exactly like all the others. That was a victim.
I think most TV shows were a victim of that. I mean, I think the worst I recall was, we might even look at this somewhere later down the line, is Blue Thunder. With that, starting the Blue Thunder up, starting the helicopter up sequence.
That sequence, here we go again.
But yeah, I think that's just a victim of economy of scale.
Yes, absolutely. And we have to remember these are TV episodes. They're not big films and such. Even if they were released in cinemas, they were really TV films made cinema or cinema released, weren't they? So yeah, so when it comes to scoring then, where are we going to land with, what did you think to Battlestar Galactica's visual effects? Where's your score? I
gave it a 7. Because I was let down by the insect creatures, which I really hated. and like you said, that end sequence on the planet where the base star's about to blow up, it lets it down. Yeah, so I gave it a 7. Good. But I do like the ship design.
Same. Yeah, same. I gave it a 7. And just to echo what you've said there, I love the Colonial Vipers. I particularly like the Cylon Raiders. I did have a model one for a while, and then I stupidly threw it out of a window. I don't quite know what I was thinking of really, but I was just messing about and just lobbed it and it went out the window and smashed. And I was like quite upset by that because it was like a model. But you can still buy them. You can still buy all of these model kits even now. You can go on Amazon right now and find a Colonial Viper kit. I think you'd be surprised how much they cost.
I wouldn't be surprised. I imagine they're dead expensive. Everything's dead expensive these days.
And I once went, just as an aside, went to a sci-fi conference that was in Cleethorpes, strangely enough, I think it was at the Winter Gardens when the Winter Gardens was there. It's now been knocked down and turned into
not the Memorial Hall.
The Memorial Hall. That's it. It was the Memorial Hall, and they had one there. And the guy had made some massive scale models of Battlestar Galactica, and a lot of other big spaceships from sci-fi. But there was a massive Cylon base star, and he'd done a massive. It all had lights and everything. A Battlestar, the original Battlestar. They were spectacular looking things. I can only imagine the original models that they used for the effects back in the day when they made it would have been spectacular to see because they would have been quite large, a large scale to shoot for all those passes, and they are quite detailed. So I think I love the designs of the spaceships, less so in Buck Rogers, but certainly. So for me, I agree with your score. I think a 7 is about right for Battlestar.
Yeah, and Buck, what did you give Buck?
Well, I think because I felt, sure, am I being too harsh because it was essentially not the same budget and not the same prowess as something like Battlestar, but at the same time they were released by essentially the same production company and about a year apart. And so I've given it a 5.
Exactly what I've given it. Yep.
Oh dear.
That's fair.
I think this is what you call an intergalactic
takedown,
whitewash. This is it. This is honestly they've just been. But Roger's just had his pants pulled down and his ass until he's slapped raw.
Absolutely, he's had a viper up his shooting out of his passage.
He has. The Cylons have made good on their promise. Yes, exactly. By your command, Buck Rogers.
Absolutely, but we still have one category left.
We do.
It's reception and influence. So it could win. It could win. I don't know.
It could storm in here with a no. Probably won't. So I suppose I'll start off with the reception and later influence of Buck Rogers. So the popular thinking around Buck Rogers was that it started out pretty well. It was well received when it was released, and it was a massive international success. In fact, both of these shows were a big international success, but Buck Rogers was particularly popular abroad, in especially across Europe and in Great Britain, where it was massively popular. And I think because we were so used to crappy effects that when we saw that, we were like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah, so,
and
absolutely.
It was, and also it's all about, with these shows, as I'm sure you'll probably touch upon with Battlestar, it's all about what time they were scheduled. Now, this is all before you could download your favorite episodes to watch whenever you like. It was all before any of that. So with scheduled shows were scheduled at a specific time on a specific day. If you weren't there at the time to watch it, you wouldn't see it unless you had a video recorder where you could potentially record it. But back then, video recorders were very expensive. And at 1980, I think it was on in 1982, Buck Rogers, strangely enough. But about that time, that video recorders were quite expensive and not everyone had one. So you either watched this thing when it was scheduled and didn't. Buck Rogers was in the UK scheduled on a Saturday tea time, which is prime time for something like that. Prime time kids time. It was right at tea time as well. I think it was about 6 o'clock, something like that. So as much as it was a bit racy, the TV show was less so. It was on and around that time. So it was season 1 was heralded as a great success internationally, as I say. Season 2, however, car crash. There were 24 episodes, including the two-part pilot episode, and there were 4 stories that were two-parters in Season 1 of Buck Rogers. Season 2 was cancelled at episode 11.
Ooh.
Oh, dear.
So
partly there's a number of factors that have factored into the massive downfall of what happened with Buck Rogers. So riding on the crest of success, the new series of Buck Rogers was hampered by both a writer's strike that was occurring at the time, and then another strike. So there was a production delay, which meant that it started production quite late. And even I think they'd also changed its scheduled time to appear. So meanwhile, it's enjoying a bit of a renaissance in Great Britain and other places. Remember that we saw the pilots as movies first before we got it on TV. They didn't come onto UK TV until about 1982, which is well late, actually. But either way, we were busy enjoying season 1 with some of its stupid storylines and everything else. Won't talk about that now. But they essentially, for season 2, replaced the entire format of Buck Rogers. It got a new producer, and the producer was a guy called John Mantley, who had previously worked mostly on television westerns, and he didn't like the idea of this original series of Buck Rogers. In fact, he hated it so much so that he changed it completely. So instead of them defending the Earth from external threats, a la the old series, Season 2, for its short run, saw Buck, Wilma, and Tweaky were part of a crew of an Earth spaceship called the Searcher on a mission to seek out the lost tribes of humanity who had scattered in the 5 centuries since Earth's 20th century nuclear war.
Hey?
Yes, something that sounds oddly familiar, right?
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah, it's a theme that was basically ripped off from Glenn A. Larson's other sci-fi show, Battlestar Galactica. Sad. Other noticeable changes that were in the second season was the disappearance of many of the regular characters, such as Dr. Hua, Dr. Theopolis, Princess Ardala, and Kane. So they never made it into the second series, the short run second series. However, they did have some new characters, you'd be pleased to know. Admiral Ephraim Asimov, who was the descendant of science fiction author Isaac Asimov.
Oh, God.
I'm not making this up. Hawk, who's miraculously and brilliantly played by Tom Christopher, who's an alien character who represents the last of the bird people.
Oh, I remember Hawk.
Dr. Goodfellow, who's played by Wilfrid Hyde-White, is an elderly scientist with insatiable curiosity. And Crichton, who was voiced by Jeff Davis, is a snobbish robot built by Dr. Goodfellow, who is basically like an odd antithesis to Tweaky. So, and Crichton has kind of a normal voice. He doesn't beagie like Tweaky does, but horribly.
No one biggies like Tweaky does.
Well, the worry there is that they replaced, in the series 2, they replaced Mel Blanc with another person's voice for 3 episodes. So the 3 episodes, he doesn't so much. Tweaky goes boogie, boogie, boogie like that. And there's even a female Tweaky, and it all goes horribly wrong. So wrong that somebody just went, for Christ's sake, turn it off. And so after 11 episodes, it got cancelled. Jill Gerard became very attached to the role of Buck and really revelled in the success of the first series, but found himself completely at odds with the new TV producers in the end, and because he felt that he knew what Buck Rogers would do, say, and be at any given opportunity. The producer of the show, less so. In the end, the tension between them meant that he became massively unhappy in his role, and of course, then it all went tits up anyway when they had him hanging around with a Birdman, and he thought, "Sod this for a game of soldiers. I'm not into it." And then so the ratings obviously dropped massively between the seasons, and even after the season premiere, it, coupled with all the problems with Jill Gerard, NBC cancelled the series at the end of the 11th episode, and they didn't even finish the storyline or finish any of the story. It just ends in a standalone episode, so there's no ending to Buck Rogers as such. And I suppose it ended up really influence-wise. Well, it's never really had an influence, I don't think, on anything that came after it. There's no sci-fi shows after Buck Rogers that have Buck Rogers influence about them, because there are other shows that are far more important and far better. Some of its costume designs, I think, perhaps maybe leaned into the more campy sci-fi, like the Flash Gordons and films. Maybe a little bit of that, I don't know. I think a little bit of that. Certainly its glamorous portrayal of its female co-stars is something that I think mercifully and thankfully was kind of killed off, because even Battlestar Galactica in its later series had some sort of more female characters in it, but even then they weren't necessarily played and over-sexualized in the way that Buck Rogers did. And I think it actually shot itself in the foot, because times were changing and Buck Rogers was a bit of a relic of a time that was changing. It's almost the equivalent of, this is the same end of that kind of TV thinking, and those kind of producers and that kind of thinking about women's portrayal on TV. It was kind of coming to an end that way. And gradually, of course, it would completely change. So empowered women were becoming the new thing. Your Dempsey, not your Dempsey Makepeace, sorry, your Tyne Daly's character and what do you call it?
Cagney and Lacey
and things like that. So there was an emancipation coming, and Buck Rogers was a bit of a relic to a situation that didn't exist anymore. And so mercifully and sadly, in some ways, I suppose, it was killed off halfway through its season. I suppose there's some interesting things about it. Maybe you could look at it that they were released, even though they did descend into utter stupidity, they were the initial roles for those women characters were commanders of a military fleet, which is unusual for a TV show at that time.
Yeah.
It was never as po-faced, perhaps, as other sci-fi shows around the time. Things like Logan's Run and other things. It didn't take itself that seriously. I think that was in the end its undoing. And because they didn't quite want to take it seriously and they went in softly with it, it just didn't quite land. And I think that's really what affected its influence. I think it will be remembered more of as a disco afterthought, and for its silly ball dancing and its famous book disco scenes more than anything else. What did you think of that?
Just saying, this thinking on Buck Rogers as well, do you think it was also a victim of the fact that thinking about essentially the plot, it's very similar to Planet of the Apes?
Yes, actually, yeah. I don't doubt that there's some issues with that.
So if you think of Planet of the Apes, because I say just
had a TV series as well.
It did have a TV series, but it was like he goes into space, doesn't he? He comes back and he doesn't realise he's crash landed back on Earth. It's hundreds of years later, the ape's taken over and he finds out he's back on Earth. That's the story. I mean, it's a very similar premise.
Only he's the ape and Daring falls in love with him. So it's a mixture of that and Harry and the Hendersons.
Yeah. But maybe people have just seen that story before. Maybe that's, I get it.
It could be partly with that, yeah.
But also trying to copy the other better show, which I'll go across in a minute, Battlestar Galactica. So that was a hit. I mean, I've got nothing really to say about Buck Rogers. It is what it is. I think you've covered everything there. Battlestar Galactica was a hit when it was released. They originally released, Universal released an edited version of the cinema, and that went on to gross over $40 million.
Ooh.
So it was a fairly big thing. It was about 120 minutes long, that version. I think that's the version we've watched. So the original 3-hour TV broadcast came a bit later, and it was interrupted, strangely enough, for an hour at the time by the signing of the peace accords at Camp David between
Cylons and the
Cylons, and it was
and then they were double crossed by somebody called Boltar.
It was the Camp David Accords, which was I think Egyptian Israel, overseen by Jimmy Carter at Camp David.
Right.
Once they were done, they just put the show back on. Okay. We've got to finish this show. There's a half hour left. But since then, this pilot has been split into 3 separate episodes. So it's interesting. It's not. We can see where those joins are. Yeah, that's what it is. It was actually criticised though at the time. It wasn't critically well received, mainly due to the show's similarity to Star Wars.
Yeah.
And the main criticism was they're saying that they'd sucked all the fun out of the concept. They'd made this dour, this dour take on sci-fi, which like people are like, oh, I've already seen Star Wars. Why would I want to watch this? It's kind of odd actually, because it's nothing like Star Wars plot-wise. It's just because
like
they're sci-fi and have spaceships. Yeah, it's nothing like that. But it went on to be a rating success on TV. It caused CBS to reschedule All in the Family and Alice against it to win back previous viewers in the prominent Sunday evening slot where this went. The problem is that they started to move it around the schedule, and it only actually lasted 1 season.
Wow.
So 24 episodes is what we got, and it was aired. So it first aired on September 17th, 1978 in the States. I don't know when it was shown over here in the UK. We just got it a few years later.
Not a lot later. It was on BBC Two, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
At that point.
But then it finished in April 29th, 1979. 24 episodes. That's all you got. So it's a weird thing, because same with Buck Rogers, you seem to think there are lots of episodes. A lot more, but there isn't. There's only 24. And some cited the ABC moving around because they wanted to put Mork and Mindy in its slot, which was their big flagship show at the time. It won a reprieve of sorts with a fan written a letter-based sort of plea to get a sequel, and that we got that in 1980 with Galactica 1980.
Oh Lord!
But the less said about that, the better, shall we say?
Yes,
it wasn't very good. Since that fact, it was revived again in 2003 for a mini-series, and then that was followed up by a 4-series run and several other films, which were up to 2009. And that version hardened the narrative. It really did, before going off the rails somewhat towards the end, when it turned out that the opening gambit of the Cylons having a plan was that they didn't have a plan, or the plan wasn't very good. So, however, the first 2 seasons, probably 2.5, so the first 2.5 seasons of that remake are incredible TV. And if you haven't seen those Battlestar Galactica shows, you should, because they're amazing. What it does show, though, in regards to influence and lasting legacy, there are legs in this idea. So the original idea of this, because the stories of another reboot with, at the moment, the guy who did Mr. Robot, Sam Esmail, is supposedly on board to create it.
Wow.
So that could be interesting. I think it's fair to say that the core notion of Battlestar Galactica, that of human life on Earth, starting out somewhere else in the universe, is always going to be a resonant science fiction theme. It's something that, there's something out there that mankind is not of this planet. It's a conspiracy theory. It's whatever it is. We were brought here by aliens, all that kind of thing. It's not a new theme, but the notion of, coupled with a notion of an entire race on the run from a far superior force, you put those two things together, that the human race came through these trials and tribulations, like you said, the Moses story. It's resonant, and I think that's why this works. Yes. More so, and has legs over time, and that's why it can be revisited. So when it works again in 2003, it does a very different job of what it's looking at, and the notion of the Holocaust and all those kind of things, which it revisits and looks at, and it can do that, and it does what sci-fi does best. It turns a lens to the world itself, to the world we find ourselves in, and it says, okay, that theme that's happening there, we're going to put this here, and we're going to take it to its logical extreme. It's when Star Trek's at its best. It's when Black Mirror's at its best. Those kind of really good sci-fi. And at the moment, the Orville, which is really, really good. I don't know if you've watched that, but you should. But that's doing some things with thematic science fiction, and this does it as well. And I think when they came up with this idea, they hit on that nerve. And I think in that respect, whilst it's not a new idea, the presentation of the series and the depth of the central theme, I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. We'll get another one of these. And I think Battlestar Galactica will be a reboot. It'll just keep going because it has that core idea, which is centrally really interesting. And that's why I think about it. What about you? Anything to add?
No, I agree with everything you've said. I think it's because they attach themselves to core themes. And I agree with you, actually. I think it's an unfair comparison to sort of stick this side by side with Star Wars, just because it was released in a similar time period. I don't doubt that one enabled the other, but there is a lot of core differences between the whole ideas that are in both the Star Wars film and certainly Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica is a really good story in its own right. Yes, the pilot goes off the rails a bit with stupid stuff, but the core, like you said, the core story is a timeless story, and therefore it will resonate. And as you rightly point out, resonated so much that it was brought back repeatedly, more often than not, because the fans really wanted it to be brought back. As much as once they watched Galactica in 1980, they didn't want it back. Although there is one really good episode of that. The last episode is actually really good. But later, when obviously because it was Richard Hatch that really pushed to get, because he funded himself. I think he mortgaged the house like 6 times or something and paid for a pilot to be made, which later became the sort of skeleton of the more recent update of Battlestar Galactica. And I find that incredible, because Richard Hatch is even in the later versions of Battlestar Galactica. So, and I find that incredible that his adherence to the understanding that is exactly you've described, that because it's a core centralized theme, because it works, that there was always mileage in it. And he really, really believed that, to the point where he literally put his money where his mouth was and said, I couldn't. And he made, I think you even see it on YouTube. I think it's like a 15 or 20 minute sort of pilot that he made of a precursor to what became the Battlestar Galactica redo with James Edward Olmos and all those other characters in it. So, of course, Battlestar Galactica has our influence, and also not to forget the visual effects for Battlestar Galactica, the recent series, is incredible. They really upped the visuals. It's weirdly at its weakest when they're not in space. So whenever you see Caprica, I think it is, spends a lot of time with Caprica, they just kind of put a funny filter on the color of the sky, and it's basically filming in a field. And sometimes because by this point we've got to visual compositing and all video, 3D visual compositing and all that. Some of the visuals are let down at that point, but they're at its weakest. Even when you're compositing the newer version of the Cylons into the sort of the battles on the planets, they look weak compared to the amazing visuals and the visual style they adopted of those spaceships in the new version, when it's got kind of a verite style and there's kind of lots of sudden handheld jumps and things like that. So its influence isn't just on the thematics and everything else and the characters. Its influence is on how TV sci-fi was made later down the line. And that is a true power of an excellent and powerful TV show. They'd never carry on using the music theme, which I think is an oversight myself, because I think, but it is kind of jovial, boppy 70s. It doesn't suit that dramatic darkness that's in the later series. But of course, there's a whole thematic around the sound and stuff that's in the later one. But I think what you can't say about Buck Rogers is it changed anything other than it, made lots of dads suddenly rethink their TV schedules around 6 p.m. on Saturday. Because Erin Gray was about to appear, and she was a striking-looking woman, and remained so throughout the entire season. Later, by the way, in the season 2 of that, just as an aside, she gets bitten by a space vampire, and she goes all vampiric, and it's a episode I recommend any adult male should watch that episode. Because it's something to see when she gets all kind of she gets all kind of space sexy, and she's got like vampire fangs. I honestly,
your adjective for everything that happens to this is it's just space at the start of it, and that just describes it. She gets space sexy, space vampires.
They are space vampires.
Space that.
It is a space vampire. But it's actually a space vampire you'll recognise. I'll find a picture of them, because when you show you the picture of the space vampires from Buck Rogers, you go, oh my God, that's where that's from. Because I think you might have used it in one of your silly adverts at one time.
Probably.
You'll find. Anyway, so I agree with what you said, and I think there's a rich influence upon TV sci-fi production that Battlestar Galactica initiated that resonates to this day. Buck Rogers, well, it just kind of, they still do conferences, don't they? And there's still people out there that love it. You'll always get them, and I'm not sure why they do, really. I guess it's sometimes shows just capture that sort of.
There'll always be fans of it. They'll always will.
And it's an easy cosplay, just dress in white, paint yourself white essentially, and be very, very perilously thin.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do Erin Gray cosplay,
yeah,
because she is very, very skinny in that. But other than that, that's it. Yeah, I agree, and that's it. So I suppose really we have to give it scores. Final scores of the final category.
Well, I gave Battlestar a 9.
Yes, same. I gave it a 9. We were very, very, our thought processes around, we're probably Cylons and we don't even realise it.
Probably. Well, until we start hearing all along the Watchtower, we won't know.
I mean, you don't hear that? By your command. Both eyes do it.
There's 3 of me sat here, 2 behind me, and I'm in the driving seat.
It's a good job they've only got that one eye, though, because if you had 2 of those things and they're desynchronized, it's just going to, Cylons are just going to look crazy all the time.
One went just slightly slower.
Yeah, it's just, well, when they break, I mean, later on, by the way, in the series, when they do get shot and break, when you do see Cylons and they go wrong, they just kind of go, and their eye just freezes or waggles slightly. So that's how you know it's damaged. Don't go near that one.
Which is like the freezing effect when he shoots Tiger Man with the freeze gun.
Oh God, that's so bad.
So bad.
Oh my God. So yes.
What did you give Buck Rogers?
Well, my Buck Rogers score was a measly 4.
Yeah, same here.
Oh dear.
Okay, time to do some maths.
Yes, well, you're the maths head. I'll leave it with your Cylon engineered mind. This should take you mere moments.
That gives Battlestar a whopping 45 and Buck Rogers 30. So out of a potential 60. So
Battlestar Galactica, 45 out of 60 in our rating schemes. And poor old Buck Rogers galumps in his man block outfit and his chest hair and he's neither buff nor super cool.
No, we needed to feel it more. Just let ourselves go, Graham, and we would have been all right.
No amount of ball dancing is going to save that. That's a measly 30. So we have to declare a winner. This is the whole purpose of the Battle of the Pilots. And in this instance, the pilot that wins the battle, of course, is Battlestar Galactica. Well done, Battlestar Galactica. Woo. Well done. Well done. All the Cylons are going in excitement. Speeds up slightly when they get excited.
My ankle.
What's he doing?
There we go.
And it's also made me think I'd like to hear that Cylon voice should be more replete in other things. I'd like to hear a version of Salem's Lot where Stryker is a Cylon. Put down that cross. Face the master.
Against his
faith. By your command.
Yeah. That always reminds me of the Cylon in Futurama, Cylon on Garfunkel.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Are you traveling to Strawberry Fair?
Are you going to Scarborough Fair?
Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme.
Rosemary, sage, parsley too.
I'm gonna have to find a clip of that, I think, and put it in.
It's good. Also, you could have sat navs done by them. I bet there is a sat nav.
Cylon bound to be the Cylon sat nav.
By your command, turn left.
Brought to you by Toltec Incorporated.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, I think Buck Rogers, its central premise is what it is, but it's Planet of the Apes in just different trousers. I think Battlestar just has more.
It's ape on a planet.
yeah. It's a planet of one ape. Whereas Battlestar it's just better. It's just better.
Yeah, it's better. Yes, it cost more and they had more money, but even so,
they were
it's
released
still
around about the same time.
Yep.
They're both on TV. They're both TV shows. We can only judge what's in front of us.
We have to choose a winner. A winner has to emerge from our discussion, and it did. And it was clearly Battlestar Galactica. Clear winner. A clear winner. No amount of Baltar-led confusion is going to change that result. I'm afraid. Perhaps it was but Roger's welcoming committee.
Baltar, it seems to, but Battlestar has won. Baltar, Baltar, Baltar.
Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed our little sojourn into the crazy world of TV pilots, and that brings this particular episode to a summary end. Is there anything you wanted to add before we sign off on our Battlestar fleets and go on our separate Viper's craft on our way to Carillon for a bit of a gamble?
I'm not going there. It's blown up. Also, as well, you have to get through it's not like driving around the M25. You got to get through that radar, that thing that you can't see when you're shooting
the maelstrom or whatever it's called.
Nightmare. Yeah. No, I've got nothing more to say. I think Battlestar is a worthy winner. Are we planning on doing more of these?
I think so. Once we've got this together, and I think there's so many TV pilots out there, it would be remiss of us not to just record some of these now and again. I don't know what kind of schedule we're going to look at. That's why this is just episode 1. So I don't know. Have we got a schedule for these?
We haven't. No, we're going to do them as and when. We've got quite a few ideas for them, but we're going to do them as and when. Because if you're listening to this and you don't know, we do these it's Zapped to the Past presents Battle of the Pilots. We do Zapped to the Past, which is a C64 podcast. So if you just come at this from out of nowhere and you're wondering what the hell this is, then that's what we also do. So you can find us there. And so, that's what this is. So this is a bit of a sidestep for us, I guess. But
it's a bit of a side project. We might put a page together and maybe pop a page on the Zapped to the Past website or something like that, just so there's a place where we can sort of post things. I don't know. So until we decide what we're going to do and until we decide what the next pilot episodes are for the battle, and bear in mind that we've got an extensive list of TV that we could explore over the last 50 years. We are only going to go really from maybe sort of the late 60s through to the late 80s, 90s. We're not going to go beyond that and look at any of the modern ones. We just don't have the time, the patience, the inclination. And to be honest, they're not crap enough. So, because they're quite good now, these shows, most of them.
Yeah, they got good.
Quite good. They got quite good at doing this stuff.
Put us out of a job.
It would. We can't just go, what do you think to that one? Oh, it's great. What about that one? Really good. Oh, it kind of kills it.
Yeah, it does.
So we will be back with another TV battle, another battle of our pilots. We will find some. And until we do come back, it just leaves me to say, I'm going to sign off with a good old by your command. Thank you for listening to this. I've been Graham Raddings.
I've been Adrian Mills.
And you have listened to Battle of the Pilots. Come again. By your command.
Please do. You can get a full pyramid.
Get a full pyramid. And if you do come back again, I promise we'll do the ball dance. To
Ace of Base.
Thank you kindly for listening to the Battle of the Pilots podcast, brought to you by the team behind Zapped to the Past. We sincerely hope you enjoyed this feisty look and comedic dive, indeed an out-and-out dust-up, between two classic pilot episodes that have graced our TV screens from over the last 50 years. We will, of course, return with another exciting and no doubt challenging episode. Until then, you can download this podcast and others from the zappedtothepast.com website, as well as listen on all good podcasting apps such as Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, Audible, Player FM, and, well, those kind of things. The Battle of the Pilots podcast is written and produced by Adrian Mills and Graham Raddings and recorded at Flaky Bits 2.0 studio. And please do remember, all opinions expressed throughout the podcast are those of the writers. Now, go and watch something new on TV. You never know. It could be the start of something brilliant.